Madam Clerk, would you call the roll?
Mayor Ronnie Felder, Chairperson Julia Botel, Chair Pro Tem Douglas Lawson,
Here.
Councilperson Todrick McCoy,
Here.
Councilperson Shirley Lanier, Councilperson Kashamba Miller Anderson,
Present.
City Manager Jonathan Evans,
Present.
City Clerk Claudine Anthony is present, City Attorney Don Nguyen.
Here.
May proceed.
Clerk, would you please call Shirley Lanier's name again? I see that she's joined us.
Councilperson Shirley Lanier,
Oh, I can see that she's here. We'll have a moment of silence followed by the Pledge of Allegiance led by Councilperson McCoy.
I pledge allegiance to the
to
flag
the flag
of the United States of America,
America,
to the
and to the
republic
republic for which it stands,
one nation,
under
under
God,
God,
indivisible,
with
with
liberty and justice
justice
for all.
for all.
Thank you. I'm going to read the public comment section. Any member of the public wishing to comment publicly on any matter, including items on the agenda, shall submit their comments by email to City Clerk Claudine Anthony at publiccomments@rivierabeach.org. That's publiccomments@rivierabeach.org. The email shall contain the applicable agenda item numbers along with the precise wording to be put into the record. Explicit language will not be read. Emails without applicable agenda items will be read under the general public comment section. Be advised, public comments will be accepted for each applicable item and the general public comment section until closure is announced by the chairperson or the city clerk. All email addresses and submitted comments are and will be public record. The city clerk and designee will read public comments into the record at the appropriate time for no more than 3 minutes. If you have any questions, please contact the city clerk's office at 561-845-4090 or email crobinson@rivierabeach.org. Do we have any additions, deletions, substitutions from the manager, the mayor, or council?
Nothing from city staff.
Do we have any disclosures by council or
Madam
the mayor?
Chair,
Yeah.
Mr. McCoy?
so I wanted to see if we can discuss deleting item number 1.
Well, we're not quite there yet, but
You asked for additions and deletions.
I asked for disclosures, I think.
No, you asked for additions and deletions.
Oh, back a few seconds ago, sorry. You're right, I did. So you want to delete item number 1?
Yes.
Okay, any objection to delete? Your agenda, no, that's, your meeting yet. That's fine, we can delete it then. Who spoke?
I did.
Yes, Councilman.
Okay, I'm not sure because I'm a little confused on the 2 agendas that we received. So are we having 2 separate meetings, one at 5 and one at 5:30? And a couple of them, I believe, are the same.
Yes.
They're kind of worded a little different, but they're in different order. So what are we doing with that? Because do we need to be deleting or what are we doing?
The advice I received from legal counsel was that we would proceed with the first one, see if the agenda is adopted. If it's adopted, we'll have that meeting. Then we'll move to the second one. If we've answered all the questions by virtue of the first meeting, perhaps the second meeting will not be adopted. But the advice I received from city council was our legal counsel.
Mhm.
This agenda is adopted.
I agree
Okay.
with
Well-
Kashama Miller Anderson. I'm not sure about what we're doing here.
Ms. Lanier, hold on one second. I want to finish with Ms. Miller Anderson. So, Ms.
Okay.
Miller Anderson, is that all right with you? You
Well,
understand?
I understand that, but then I know when we had our last city council meeting, we talked about, Mr. McCoy wanted to do the special meeting regarding the pandemic pay policy. But the emergency for COVID, I don't know, what are we doing with that? Because there was a little backup and I don't know what we're doing with that. And then number 4, phase 1 City of Riviera Beach reopening plan, because there was no backup for that either. What are we expected to talk about tonight? Because I know we were supposed to be talking about the pandemic pay. And so that, we got some of that information last week. But for the items 3 and 4, what were we to prepare for to have a discussion about tonight on those?
Well, the moment will come very shortly when we can decide whether or not we want to have a discussion, in fact, whether we want to have this agenda be adopted. So our fallback position, if you will, would be to adopt the second proposed agenda, which does include the pandemic pay policy. So if we could move forward on this, maybe it will become clearer if we, and I agree, there was no backup provided for any of these items. So we're coming into this somewhat cold. Councilperson Lanier, you had a question.
Yeah, I just had a question. I'm looking at, I think I saw last week that the item for the agenda had like 3 or 4 items on it, but I just downloaded the agenda and it only has 2 items on it. Number 1, discussion and review of the pandemic pay policy, and number 2, transition from local state of emergency provided in section Florida statute sections. I only have 2 on here. So is what agenda are we going by?
Lanier, there's a 5 o'clock special meeting that was called for by Councilperson McCoy,
Right.
and a 5.
Yes.
You're looking at the 5:30. It was called.
Oh, it's 2. It's 5 and 5:30.
5 o'clock and a 5. And at
Okay, well, give me a minute to download that particular agenda. I did not see. I'm not sure of what I'm doing at this point because I have 1 agenda, I have 2 agendas, and now you're saying there's a 3rd agenda. So I need to pull down the one that's for exactly at 5, right?
Yes, there's a 5 o'clock, and that's the one that
Okay.
at present time has 4 items on it, and that was the
Okay.
proposed by Councilman McCoy, and then there was a 5:30 agenda which has a duplicate item on it proposed by Councilperson Lawson. So
Okay. Yes, ma'am. I'll go ahead.
we will be voting on whether or not to accept this agenda, so, which obviously we don't have to. So let me just see where I am. McCoy asked to delete item number 1. So we'll delete item number 1 from the agenda. Madam Clerk, will you please make that notation?
Duly noted.
Thank you. Okay, now we are at the, sorry. Do we have any disclosures? So, do I have a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Madam Clerk, will you call the roll?
Councilperson McCoy,
Yes.
Councilperson Miller Anderson,
No.
Councilperson Lanier,
No.
Pro Tem Lawson,
Yes.
Chair Botel.
No. The agenda is not,
Fails with Councilpersons Miller Anderson, Lanier, and Botel dissenting.
now, I ask our city, just to be clear, we have a 5:30 agenda. Do we need to wait until 5:30 to adopt or not adopt this agenda?
You don't need to wait because the agenda says that it's either at 5:30 or immediately following the 5 o'clock.
Okay, thank you. We will dispense with the other
Madam
formality.
Chair,
Yes, Ms. Miller Anderson.
not on the 5:30 one. I don't see that on there. It says it for the CRA meeting for the 7 p.m.
If you look,
Okay,
If you
I'm
look
sorry. Yeah,
on the-
it's just in a different spot from the CRA. I see it. Thank you.
Okay, so we'll dispense with the pledge and the reading of the information about public comments. And I will, again, does anyone have disclosures? Well, let me first ask any additions, deletions, or substitutions from the manager, the mayor, or council?
Madam Chair, my
Who's
apologies.
speaking
That's,
to me?
this is Claudine. This is Mrs. Anthony speaking. You need to adjourn your 5 o'clock, meeting and then
Oh,
call
absolutely.
the,
Well, even though it wasn't, well, we didn't adopt the agenda, but we still have to adjourn. Okay, so let me back up, rewind the clock. The 5 o'clock meeting is adjourned.
thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam
So you
Clerk.
don't have public comments or member comments?
No,
Madam
we don't
Chair.
have, we don't have to, because the agenda wasn't adopted.
So city council doesn't make comments?
You're not recognized, Mr. McCoy. Ms. Lanier?
Madam Chair, I just want to be clear because I have two agendas in front of me. One that says 7 o'clock p.m. or immediately following the special city council meeting, and one for 5:30 today that has two items on it. So let me be straight about this, clear about this. The one that was scheduled for 5 o'clock, which I did not see, is the one that we said that we're not going to have.
Yes,
Okay.
you're correct. Mr. McCoy, did you have something to say?
So what necessitates removing the ability for board members to have a comment? It's one thing not to adopt the agenda, but just as a natural procedural function, I'm an elected member of the city council, duly elected, I might add, and I'm also a resident, despite some who don't think so. I think I'm afforded an opportunity to make my comments as a board member. Now,
Well,
is there anything that prohibits that?
Yes, I checked with council before the meeting, and we do not have to have comments of any kind at the meeting. And as a matter of fact, we're about to enter into this 5:30 meeting, and I think that if we have that meeting, you can have your comments at that time. So, Ms.
If
Nguyen, am
we had-
I correct about that?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Thank you. So let's proceed with this 5:30 then. Did we have any requests or disclosures from the mayor or council?
Madam Chair, this is Claudine speaking again.
Yes.
We have to call to order this meeting, and we have to do a roll call for this meeting. I know it's continuous, but we still have protocol we have to follow.
Keeping me honest. So I call the special city council meeting of May 13th at 5:30 to order. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Mayor Ronnie Felder. Chairperson Julia Botel. Chairperson Julia Botel.
Here.
Chair Pro Tem Douglas Lawson.
Here.
Councilperson Troderick McCoy.
Here,
Councilperson Shirley Lanier. Councilperson Kashamba Miller Anderson.
Present.
City Manager Jonathan Evans.
Present.
City Clerk Claudine Anthony is present. City Attorney Don Nguyen.
Here.
May proceed.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Mr. Mayor Felder is here. Maybe he can't hear. He's here.
Mayor, we're not hearing you even though it looks like your mic is on. Maybe your volume is turned down. Shake it. We're still not hearing you, Mayor. Do you have headphones plugged in maybe and you need to unplug them or? No, we're still not hearing you. No.
Okay. Madam
Okay,
Chair.
well, maybe
And Ms.
Walter,
Lanier wasn't, I don't know if she was present at the time either.
yeah, Ms. Lanier, Madam Clerk, would you please just call Shirley Lanier's name so she can say she's present?
Councilperson Lanier.
We're having technical difficulties. We can't hear you either, Shirley. Shirley, is your thought, Ms. Lanier, can you hear me? Shake your head if you can hear me. She must not be hearing me. Ms. Lanier? Shirley? I don't think she can hear me. Well, I'm going to ask Walter or someone in a position of that doesn't have to be part of the meeting necessarily to try to contact by phone Ms. Lanier and Mayor Felder and assist them with their technology so we can keep going. So because we have a quorum without Shirley, so we're okay. Did we have any disclosures or does anybody want to make any additions, deletions, or substitutions? Okay, so can I get a motion to adopt this agenda?
so move.
Can I get a
Second.
Madam Clerk, would you call the roll?
Councilperson McCoy.
Yes,
Councilperson Miller Anderson.
Yes.
Councilperson Lanier. Okay, we can't.
Yeah,
You can't-
Call Shirley.
Okay. Pro Tem Lawson,
Yes.
Chair Botel.
Yes.
That motion is approved without the consent of Councilperson Lanier.
We'll talk about it. So the first item on the agenda, and may I clarify with Mr. Lawson? Mr. Lawson, could you please clear that your first discussion item is a discussion and review of pandemic pay policy? This second item says transition from local state of emergency provided and review of the pandemic pay policy. You can modify that.
She's on her phone, it shows the phone symbol.
Excuse me, Dr. Botel? Can they hear me now?
Yeah,
Yes,
we
I
can hear you, Mr.
Oh, okay. Mrs. Lanier is trying to get on, and I think if we can't hear her and we have to iron out these technical difficulties, maybe we should take a 5-minute recess to give her an opportunity to hear the presentation, because we know that she's on, we can see her. And I think the same for Mayor Felder.
And why
I don't know.
are their symbols different because they're connected by telephone rather than computer? Why do we see them?
That's what that's what we need to get, I guess, Walter or Marcia an opportunity to try to figure it out.
All right, it's 5:17. Let's go to 5:25 to give them ample time to figure it out. So sorry, we'll resume at 5:25.
Thank you.
Right. Miss Mayor Felder, if you can hold on. I see that you show a telephone symbol, so it's possible that you may have to get into your settings, which should be at the far right at the top. That symbol.
Go out and come back in. Right.
Okay. All right, I'm on now. Okay.
I got a feeling his computer is muted.
Thank you, Deirdre.
Didn't he say he
Hold
wasn't
on.
listening?
Okay. Mayor Felder, can you hear me?
All right.
Mayor Felder? Okay.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yes,
Yes, Ms. Lanier, we can hear you.
issue. Software is fine, but there's still
Ms. Lanier? Oh, she's fixed her problem, but. Good, we're all here. Gang's all here. So item number 1, Mr. Lawson.
Yes, Madam Chair, you had a question about item number 2, correct?
I only insofar as it seems to be duplicative.
Well, no, the verbiage is incorrect. The email that was sent on May 11th requested that the verbiage read, and I would actually like to have this corrected for the record. Transition from local state of emergency provided in section 252.38 Florida statute and sections 15 and 2-29 of the Riviera Beach Code of Ordinance to recovery. So being that we set a state of emergency, what does our plan look like of action to the state of recovery that we're going towards? So it's actually listed incorrectly on the agenda versus what was emailed to the clerk.
Thank you. So we'll just strike the section that says discussion and review of the pandemic pay policy, since that's item number 1.
Correct.
Madam Chair,
Miller Anderson.
Mr. Lawson, you said 2-2029 or 26?
26, 2-26.
Okay, so item number 1, discussion and review of the pandemic pay policy. Mr. Wilson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I actually wanted to have this discussion. I know that Councilman McCoy had talked about this at the last meeting, and I wanted to give an opportunity for our staff to give a presentation and to give us a detailed update on what's going on with the pandemic pay, the policy that we have in place that was implemented so that we could kind of put this discussion item to rest. I also believe that we have received some additional documentation during the week that a few of my colleagues wanted to actually review as well. So I wanted to take this time for us to review this, to discuss this, and we can move forward from this. So I'm going to actually let Mr. Evans go ahead with his presentation in regards to the policy.
Thank you, Mr. Lawson. Mr. Evans? Let me first say, while you're turning your mic on, that I appreciate the voluminous information you provided to speak on this topic. Mr. Evans?
Madam Chair,
Who's speaking?
Claudine,
Yes, Claudine.
we do have public comments on this item. The acceptance of public comments on this item is now closed.
Okay, so Mr. Evans, can we hear public comments first? Yes, go ahead, Claudine.
The first public comment comes from Ernest Bullard. I work for the Riviera Beach Police Department and I work 40 hours a week. Why do you think it's a good idea to give the city manager and the other highest paid positions in Riviera Beach special pay while not doing anything for employees like myself who continue to man the front lines and work full-time within the city? The next public comment comes from Dana Glorit. I am working 40 hours a week as police service aide, putting me and my life at risk to make sure that we continue to provide the best service to residents of Riviera Beach. Does my work not count? Am I not valued by my city? If so, why do managers, supervisors get to stay home and work via telephone and get time and a half when I'm working in the city every day? There are captains, majors, and above who come to into work every day and are getting time and a half. Why not me? I'm dispatched to call my entire shift. The next public comment says, I am a employee of the city of Riviera Beach, and we are not receiving pandemic pay, only administrators. I am afraid of retaliation or getting fired because I disagree with how the city is not considerate of paying us when our lives are at risk every day, coming to work and experiencing working with and around coworkers who have tested positive for COVID-19. This is not fair, and I feel that the employees who are coming to work shall be paid additional time and a half for pandemic pay, or same as the administrator's policy. Please do not disclose my information because I am in fear of harassment. The next public comment came from Concerned Smith. Good evening, City Council and Mayor. I am a concerned employee of the city and have chosen to remain anonymous in fear of retaliation. I wish to comment on the policy that allowed management to receive a pay rate of time and a half during a pandemic while your dedicated union employees were ignored. Our new manager went to the news to show how benevolent the city has been by paying all workers during this pandemic, but he failed to acknowledge that this is standard with other agencies in our area. What is not standard is enacted policy that fills the pockets of 70 employees while saying the rest of us should look the other way and just be happy to be paid at all. Not only have other cities chosen to continue to pay all of their employees regardless of their specific work arrangements, some have even chosen to increase the pay of their essential employees. But no city other than ours has chosen to only increase the pay for management. Some of us are being paid to stay at home in order to be well enough to return when called upon. Some of us are working remotely in order to be well enough to return when called upon. Some of us are working remotely and reporting to the office minimally in order to be well enough to return when called upon. And some of us have reported to work every single day, despite the risk, in order to keep the city running. None of us chose this, but 70 employees chose to profit from this. We are asking for the council to address this. We are asking for some compensation to feel like we matter to this city too.
Madam
The
Chair?
next public.
Madam Chair, I have a question. So with the public comment cards, Ms. Nguyen, we take anonymous public comment cards. I'm just thinking how that would work if we were actually in the chambers.
Good question.
Well, if we
And
were
I
in
do-
chambers,
Mhm.
the person would be there. I didn't know that we had anonymous public comment cards.
Okay, I mean, I can certainly understand if an employee feels that they may receive some sort of harassment of some sort, but I just don't want us taking advantage of this platform of, being able to submit. I mean, that's not being transparent if we don't have names, or how do we even know this is a real legitimate comment from an employee? We don't know that.
Right.
And I don't want us, to be in a position where we have all of these comments and it may not even be real. I certainly can understand if an employee feels they may be harassed. I get that. But at the same time, if we were in the chambers, I don't know how that would play out. And I don't feel it's right that we're taking advantage of the situation right now. Go ahead, I'm sorry, go ahead. No, go ahead.
My concern would be looking to the future on any number of other topics where certain members of our community might attempt to put in multiple comments when we know he only represents himself. So that I think that in the future, we should really be careful about this, and not take comments that are anonymous. So I don't know how the rest of the council feels. Is this something that we should
You can decide right now not to take, if there are any more anonymous comment cards, not to take those.
I think it's not safe to do, given that we have people who would take it. And I am not saying that these particular people are taking advantage or are looking to do. Please don't construe that what I'm saying to be that.
I certainly agree with the question that Shama Miller Anderson, Councilwoman Miller Anderson, posed, was the fact that when you're coming up to the podium, in a physical setting. A person sees you, a person knows who you are. You have to submit a card that says who you are. And then, as a good friend of mine, JB Dixon, said, where are you? Where do you live in the city? So if you can't even provide that basic information about who you are and where you live in the city, or if you're a city employee, then how do we know it's not someone? We're not saying people do this. All we're saying is that we have to be very careful of people submitting information or submitting questions. And number one, are not city employees. Number two, don't live in the city. And number three, have no interest in what the city does and how it does business. So if we're going to take anonymous um, 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 cards or comments, then we just need to open up the phone lines and say, whoever has an issue about the city of Riviera Beach, just call in and you can be online. So
Thank,
yeah, I agree with that.
thank you, Councilman Lanier. Councilman McCoy, your mic.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Did I just hear the gentle lady from the 3rd District say we need to be careful to make sure that the people are city residents or employees? Let me remind you, you don't have to be either. In fact, if I can reiterate the First Amendment that states Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. So I don't understand how this becomes an issue of a person has to live in the city or be a resident of the city. Quite honestly, we're on a very slippery slope, and I'm gonna caution you, if you tell somebody that they can't make a comment because they don't feel like they need, because they don't want to say their name, you're violating the Constitution. That is the supreme law in this whole entire country. And if you're suggesting to me that a person has to give up anonymity to say who they are without respecting at least the First Amendment that says you don't have to have any kind of prerequisite, you don't have to say your name, or you don't have to establish that you're a city resident, that's just outright and utterly ridiculous to even hear this discussion going on. And especially that the conversation deals around an employee who is here for public service, is giving their life and their time, and to say that they are afraid or in fear of retaliation and possible harassment, that we're going to basically do exactly what the Constitution says we shouldn't do. Like, there is no requirement. And if that's the case, then I'm going to put on record now that I think constitutionally you guys are violating the law to suggest that somebody has to be a resident or even a citizen or even an employee of the city to speak, because I wanted to make sure I capture that. But to say we have to be careful, no, we have to be careful not to allow people the opportunity to participate in the public process. And clearly, this is an item that I probably received at least 2 or 3 dozen phone calls just about, or somebody doing unexpected visits. But to sit here and suggest that, I think we're opening ourselves back up to additional litigation and even more problems that's way more severe than the issue that we're addressing right now. And I reserve my time.
And yes, Madam
Miller Anderson and then Ms. Lanier. Miller Anderson.
So I just want to be very clear. It is, for me, it is not about, I know you addressed Ms. Lanier, but for me, it's not about whether or not they're a resident, whether they're an employee. I am speaking in terms of setting a precedent. And when we have been in our physical location, we have not allowed people to make numerous public comment submissions. And essentially, that's what we would have at this point if we have people that are doing anonymous submissions. The other thing is, if it is supposed to be a public record, they obviously have to have the email address if it was submitted by email. I would assume it was by email. So we at least have an email address. Something needs to be identified. And believe me, I'm not going to make this about retaliation if you have an issue, I understand that. But I do still feel like we have to not open up a door that we cannot handle when we get back into the chambers. And when we get back into the chambers, I can't imagine how do you do an anonymous submission? You just maybe give it to someone else and have that other person come up and speak for you, but someone is present, you do see someone. So I just think that we need to make sure that we're not, don't take advantage of this platform. I think everyone has a clear understanding of how the employees feel. We have all received phone calls. We have all received emails. We currently have an SEIU person on Zoom on our meeting platform right now, which I was not aware of, but they're there. And the thing is, I mean, I understand this is one issue, but if we make this decision on this now, we're going to have to apply that to all issues, even when we get back into the chambers. And so just for this one issue, I don't see why we should not try to deviate from that unless we know we have a legal standing or something that is going to prevent us from saying that we do not have to take anonymous public comment cards. I think the sentiments have been expressed, not to demean or belittle anyone's thoughts on this whole process, but I think we've heard from a lot of people. And then the union rep is here. If he's on here to speak, then, he would be the one that would represent him. I don't know I would assume that's who he is. I don't know who Joseph is, but I would assume that's what he's here for.
Ms. Lanier, I just want to defer to the city clerk first, and then I'll Ms. Anthony. Claudine.
Madam Chair and members of the council, I need to advise that the comments that Ms. Hall is reading into the record, they are stating that anonymity. We do have someone that did submit their comment via their telephone number. I don't know if we can read their telephone number into the record if we're required. I'm really not for certain how this will go as far as being asked to remain anonymous. Yes, we do have email addresses, and you have read into the record that emails are public record and will be part of the record for this meeting. So those who stated anonymity, they need to understand that this email will be public record and someone can gather their information from the email. That's just my 2 cents on this matter.
Thank you, Ms. Lanier, and then I'll ask our city attorney to weigh in. Ms. Lanier.
Yeah, I think the city attorney needs to weigh in, because if we have public comment cards, if we're in a physical setting, and a person sends fills out a card, gives it to Claudine Anthony and says, listen, I don't want no one to know who I am. I just want to be able to just state my cause. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. In fact, there are plenty of times I wish I were anonymous in terms of the way things happen and the way things go down. But the thing about it is that we are in a new normal now. That means that the way that you do business is that if you have something to say, not saying that you have to disclose anything, but disclosing the fact that you are a city employee, disclosing the fact that you live in the city, then that means that you have some vested interest in this city. But if you don't have any vested interest in the city, you don't live here, you don't work here, you don't reside here. Not saying you have nothing to say, but this is a public meeting. And if anything that you want to say, I say, okay, yes, you can say it. But at what point, and that's what I'm asking the city attorney to give us some feedback on this. At what point do we say we got 200 anonymous cards that people want to say something about? I don't know where they live. I don't know if they work for the city, but we got 200. So do we read all 200 into the public record, or how do we do that?
First, let me say that it doesn't matter where the person lives or whether they're employees or residents. Everyone has a right to make a public comment. However, as you stated, Councilperson Lanier, we are in a new normal. This is uncharted territory. You all can adopt a procedure whereby you don't accept anonymous public comment. The person has to give their name. They have to have some form of identification. Or you won't read the comments. You can still file them into the record, but you can refuse to read the comment. If someone were at a regular city council meeting and they took a card, they filled it out, they said they wanted to speak on item number 1, how would Ms. Anthony know, the clerk know, who to even call up to speak? You have to have a name. You have to have some way to identify people. But again, it is the prerogative of the board, of the council. If you all want to accept anonymous public comments and read them all into the record, and they would be on every item if people so chose, then that's your decision, because you all determine the rules of the procedure for the most part.
So to be clear, Ms. Nguyen, there's nothing unconstitutional about our requirement to identify themselves?
Correct.
Mr. McCoy?
So here's where I'm going to disagree, Ms. Nguyen, because even even in courts of law, individuals have filed legal cases and have litigated under pseudonym names and names such as John Doe and Jane Doe. So an easy example is if you don't have a name for someone that presents, you can name them John Doe number 1 on item number 1. But at least you can
There's a name.
have their comments heard. And you cannot create a prerequisite law to say they have to live in the city, be a citizen, or even have to give their name. Even if you must recall, even from a public records request, you don't even have to establish your name or even where you're coming from. But I'm telling you, if we start down this road, I'm going to vehemently oppose this. And I think you're going to open yourself up for additional litigation. And I would recommend that we use something like John Doe number 1. But this is a real serious issue where you have employees who are saying that they are in fear of retaliation, and we're going to suggest to them, because you don't want to say your name, the very thing that they're trying to protect, they're not allowed to make a comment. Well, I'm telling you, y'all might as well get ready for a deposition, because you guys are going to get sued, and I think that's outright unconstitutional and improper. I mean, we're a government, we're elected by the people. And if you sit here and tell me that you can't even have somebody to come in and submit a name, and then the other part of it is this: who are we as elected officials to tell somebody what their name is? I've seen the basketball player Ron Artest now change his name again. So if somebody wants to name themselves Jack Daniels, for instance, you shouldn't require somebody who we really know is not Jack Daniels to give their legal name. There's no requirement, and that's exactly what the Constitution represents. You can't abridge a person's ability for speech and expression. And I mean, to have this conversation at this point is just outright, I think, inappropriate.
Now, Mr. McCoy, I do agree. I do agree. I mean, I do agree with what you're saying. But Mr. McCoy, when people come into
Ms. Lanier, Mr. Lawson had his hand up first. I know it's different to your colleagues, but he was first. Mr. Lawson, and then Ms. Lanier, and then Ms. Miller Anderson. Go ahead, Mr. Lawson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. To Councilman McCoy's point, what is stopping us from any resident coming up and giving an alias or a pseudo address? My concern is that we don't have the ability to dictate what they tell us when they come in front of us, but the fact that they're sending in emails with our new norm that we haven't established or created. I also hear Ms. Miller Anderson. We have to kind of set a precedence from now and move forward from that. So at first, I didn't want to continue this discussion because we have important items in the CRA meeting to get to, but I do believe that we need to come up with a precedence that we're going to set and move forward with it.
Ms. Lanier. Thank you, Mr. Lawson. Ms. Lanier.
I just wanted to say that I totally agree with Councilman McCoy and with Councilman Lawson in terms of giving people the opportunity to speak in terms of whatever it is they want to say. But if you're going into a court of law, they have what they call sworn affidavits. That means if you're John Doe or Jane Doe, you have to swear on that affidavit that this is what you want to say. So unless we get into sworn affidavits, unless we get into the person has has a notarized version of what they want to say, I don't see how is it that we are in a position, and no other municipality does this, in a position where we are taking anonymous calls, anonymous written statements from people. And don't get me wrong, I agree. I totally agree that in terms of the First Amendment, whatever you want to say, unless you don't, of course you can't yell fire in a crowded building, but whatever you want to say, you have the right to say that. But there are stipulations on that right to be able to say whatever it is that you want to say.
Thank you. Ms. Miller Anderson.
Okay, so obviously there was a loophole for tonight that we did not see coming. I do not have a problem. I do have a problem, but because of the situation, I'm okay with going ahead and taking it. But you know what? I want to see, and the reason I'm saying this is because I just have an issue and it's not about the employees. I just have an issue with the fact that we are now setting ourselves up for other things down the line. And so I'm okay with it going tonight, only because you know what, we need to move on, and it makes no sense. And while we're sitting here having to have this long discussion over this, when if something like that came up, that should have been addressed. That should have been brought to somebody's attention up front. We shouldn't have been caught off guard with that, because that's not something we've ever dealt with. So that definitely should have been brought up before now. But I do want for our next meeting for us to have some kind of policy to address this issue with, because if we're going to be on this platform going forward for a little bit, we need to know how to deal with it, and instead of having to play around with it. So you know what? I'm fine with them going ahead tonight, but for the next meeting, this needs to be talked about so that we can handle it the right way.
Thank you very much. I agree. Ms. Nguyen.
I will develop a policy for you for your next meeting. I'll disseminate it to you prior to that so that you all can give me individual feedback.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, how many more letters do we have?
We have one more, and the last one. Are you ready for me to proceed, Madam Chair?
Right ahead. Thank you.
Okay. The last public comment comes from Kayla Lopez. Her name is Carlo Lopez, and I am a union representative with the Professional Managers and Supervisors Association, or the PMSA, the union representing the supervisors employed by the city of Riviera Beach. For the past 2 months, and likely continuing for some time, the members of PMSA, along with their brothers and sisters represented by SEIU, have been working in an effort to make certain that the citizens of Riviera Beach can continue to rely on the services provided by the city. On March 20th, 2020, the city implemented a pandemic pay policy that provides additional pay for employees who are working during the pandemic. Regrettably, this policy was implemented without discussion with the PMSA, and as it specifically exempts employees represented by PMSA and SEIU, and ends up only providing a benefit for the city's administration and few other employees. The pandemic pay policy, by carving out members of PMSA and SEIU, fails to provide a benefit for the workers who keep the water flowing, the toilets flushing, the city's vehicles running, and the lights on. Communities around the nation are recognizing their public workers as heroes and making certain that they are working safely and paid appropriately. PMSA asks City Council to do the right thing by expanding the coverage of the city's pandemic pay policy to all city workers, including those represented by PMSA and SEIU. Madam Chair, that concludes public comment for this item.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. Mr. Lawson.
Madam Chair?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Mr. Lawson, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was going to ask Mr. Evans, of course, to present. I just had 2 questions and a comment for Mr. Evans before he actually presents on his topics. Mr. Evans, the first question is the pandemic pay policy in line with the hurricane disaster pay policy that we currently have?
Yes, the policy was modeled after the 2005 disaster pay policy.
Okay. And second, so it was a policy that was established from 2005. The city is operating under the approved union contracts. Union employees are not working outside of their usual jobs, correct?
That is correct. And we are in compliance with all union contracts, to the point where we've also provided for increases that are articulated in the collective bargaining agreements.
Okay. So I guess the biggest concern, and also one more topic, I see that Ms. Kashamba mentioned that there was a Joseph on the line. I see his name here, but I wasn't aware he was going to be on this call. So could we get an introduction as to who he is? And if my colleagues would allow, I believe he's from SEIU, as stated, director of SEIU or something.
And not to interrupt you, Mr. Lawson, but who? I don't know anybody else that's on here either. Who's on this call with us? Yes.
And that's what I'm trying to get clarity on, because I didn't realize there was going to be a representative.
Yes, thank you.
He was probably transitioned from the first agenda that we didn't adopt, and he was probably going to be a speaker there. So I'm assuming that's what he was part of. So if we get some clarity on who he is, if he's going to remain on the line and present, if it's something that my colleagues would entertain, or if he's going to drop off, I wanted to give that opportunity before we have Mr. Evans go in as well.
Thank you, Mr. Lawson. Joseph, are you there?
Hello, can you see me and hear me? I'm here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Brenner, do you have a presentation or are you presenting on behalf of SEIU?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
I
how
have
long
a-
is
I
your
have a-
presentation?
I'm
How
sorry,
long is your presentation, Mr. Brenner?
approximately 5 to 6 minutes.
Okay. Colleagues, would we allow for him to give this presentation since he has been on the line?
That's fine with me.
No, I don't even know about a presentation. I didn't think there was going to be a presentation tonight. I don't know about this. It wasn't a part of the agenda. There was no presentation on the agenda from SEIU, which means that I did not get any information about SEIU's presentation. I don't have anything in my hand for SEIU's presentation. I don't know, Mr. Lawson.
Right, no, and I understand. That's why I was asking for the request of my colleagues because I wasn't sure about this as well. I was giving Mr. Evans an opportunity to speak on behalf of it, but I also do believe that SEIU has been emailing and sending information over. So if we can afford him the 5 minutes, I would love to give him that opportunity so that we can kind of hear both sides. I would love to give him that 5-minute opportunity to speak if granted.
Mr.
Well,
McCoy?
we can call for a vote for that because if the vote says that we can hear him, fine. If the vote says no, then not. So I would
I
call
agree.
for a vote for that. Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir.
I agree, Ms. Lanier.
Well, if you're making a motion, we can vote on a motion. I suppose if you want to make a motion and get someone to second it, then why don't you make that motion? We'll get a second and then we'll vote on your motion.
Because I was not oh, go ahead, Mr. Lawson.
No, go ahead,
Miss-
Ms.
Miller
Miller.
Anderson. Go ahead.
So if Mr. Lawson did not have him on the agenda to do a presentation, was it you, Mr. McCoy, that asked for him to come on to do a presentation? It was you, Mr. McCoy?
Yes.
Okay, all right, so
Madam
Go
So,
ahead.
Chair.
Mr. McCoy, if you would have told us that he was going to be on for a presentation, I would have been prepared to even ask questions. But I'm not prepared because it was not a part of the agenda item that he would be on to present tonight.
Well, here's my concern, and I actually had a conversation with the attorney last night. This is directly germane to the conversation of the pandemic pay policy. No, I didn't enumerate a specific separate item for a presentation by SEIU because it falls under the pandemic pay policy. And I think Ms. Wynn can probably testify to the very case law that I spoke of last night with her. I believe it was Hugh versus someone, that you don't actually have to have a specific item placed on the agenda for us to take action on it or for us to have a presentation on it. So it wasn't that I wanted SEIU to have their own item. This is germane to the subject that I called the special meeting for, and that the members of this body chose not to adopt, that we very much were aware of last week when we left the city council meeting, that there'll be a special meeting called. So, you know, I know it's not something that was very clearly stated, but respectfully, this is germane to the conversation.
And sir, it may be germane to the conversation, and I appreciate that, Councilman McCoy, but I am not prepared to entertain questions from Mr. Joseph here because I was not aware of his presence. Now,
Well, I yield my time then.
I'd like to, Ms. Miller, excuse me, we haven't heard from Ms. Miller Anderson on this topic. Ms. Miller Anderson?
So for this, my question right now is regarding the SEIU contract with them doing this presentation, Ms. Nguyen. Would this be considered getting into negotiating, or they are just presenting their point? For the record, I see at 5:32, Ms. Afifa did send an email, I guess, with the presentation from SEIU, which I just happen to be looking at now. But I mean, I haven't read it, so I would imagine that this is what it's about. So my question, Ms. Nguyen, is this getting into negotiating, or is this just him providing his position?
yeah, and this is my. I'm sorry, Madam Chair. Let me speak. This is my heartburn with this, is because we're talking to an SIU representative. We're getting into the territory of bargaining and that kind of thing that we're looking at SEIU's bargaining position. We're looking at bargaining here. If a presentation is going to be presented to us, he's going to present the best possible way for SEIU. That is bargaining. We cannot do bargaining tonight with an agenda item that just talking about pay pandemic policy. We're getting into the whole realm of bargaining here, people. I'm telling you, this is not. Now we want to take a vote on it. We can vote on this, but this we're getting into. If we have an SEIU representative here tonight, you know what that means? That means that we are open up for bargaining now.
Can Ms.
let-
Wynn answer, please?
Yes. Madam Chair,
Wait, 1 second.
I don't,
And
I was,
then-
Wait a minute. I don't understand this. So what would,
McCoy, wait, you're not recognized. Miss Wynn is recognized. Joseph, what's your last name? I keep calling you Mr. Joseph.
Brenner, Brenner.
All right, Miss Wynn, Mr. Brenner, and then Mr. McCoy. Miss Wynn.
I don't know. I wasn't aware that Mr. Brenner would be on the call, so I don't know what his presentation is. We have always cautioned you all that we don't negotiate in public. Again, I don't know what his intent is.
Mr. Brenner.
Well, first to that statement, I want to say you have to negotiate in public as you're a public entity in all meeting. All bargaining sessions are public by their very definition. And it's illegal not to. But to the point made by the councilwoman, I'm not here to give a union proposal for consideration by the city. I'm here to speak directly to a pay policy as a regarding the public comment to that and provide some information that was not provided the last time we discussed a different meeting. So I'm not advancing a very specific proposal.
Thank
That
you,
is
Mr.
considered bargaining.
Mr. Brenner. Mr. McCoy.
thank you, Madam Chair. So here's where I'm at, and I'm definitely going to reserve an opportunity. I want to make sure that I state this. Mr. Lanier, I have to respectfully disagree. If we don't allow SEIU, we just allowed the manager to increase his pay and also increase Ms. Wynn's pay, which is completely outside of their contract when they're actually employed at the city under an agreement. And all these folks want is an opportunity to come to the table to let us know as a body that this is the sentiments of the union and what they're feeling about the pay pandemic policy. That's where it begins and ends. And I do want to make a point to bring up the fact that I want to have a very thorough discussion about the very premise of you're going to use the fact that they're on the collective bargaining agreement, but we got the top two highest paid individuals of the city who's under an agreement which is nearly, as far as I'm concerned, legally enforceable, and we're going to allow them to change their policy and can't even hear from the representatives that represent over 200 employees. Clearly, this is something that has not went away. Even so much, it's an article in the newspaper about it. But I can tell you one thing: you can vote against it, but I am going to certainly ask that we have Mr. Evans' contract here on the table today, as well as Ms. Dawn Wynn's, because clearly we've allowed a pandemic pay policy that increased their pay that's completely outside of anything in their contract. And here's why I'm going to say that. The very first reason why this needs to happen is because if we stop this pay pandemic policy right now today, Jonathan Evans or Dawn Wynn has no legal recourse against the city. You know why? Because they weren't entitled to it under their current contractual agreement. So to hear you sit here and say that we're going to be opening up negotiations again is basically a slap in the face for all of the citizens when you allow the manager to unilaterally increase his own salary and the salary of the city attorney, and then telling these folks they can't even have a discussion publicly when he created this policy privately. That's exactly what you're doing.
No, I am not saying that, Mr. McCoy. Mr. McCoy, I'm not saying that. All I'm saying is that tonight,
I'm going to start controlling.
Tonight we were not prepared. We were not prepared for this one. If you're going to have a,
you are done with this conversation, okay? Thank you.
Madam Chair,
no,
you're
Mr.
all
McCoy,
elected. Don't cut off an elected official.
No, I'm doing just that.
Okay.
We are going to a
Well,
vote.
you don't have the authority to stop someone from speaking, Madam Chair.
Yes, I do. We're going
Under
to
what
stop
authority?
under my authority as the chair. We're going to stop this conversation.
You're absolutely wrong and you're incorrect. We're all duly elected members. And at the point where an elected official stops talking, that's when they
Boy.
give the floor back. But don't interrupt someone and tell them they're done talking. I think it's rude and disrespectful.
Yes, you're done talking, Mr. McCoy. We're going to take this to a vote because there's too much back and forth on this, and I need to know exactly what the sentiment of the whole council is. So, Ms. Nguyen, do we have to have this as a motion, or can we just get consensus?
You need
Roll
to have a
call.
motion.
I request a roll call.
Okay, who's going to make the motion?
I'll make the
Miss-
motion. I'm making the motion, Madam Chair, that based on the item of number 1 and having a conversation about the pandemic pay policy, that we have in our midst a representative from SEIU, which I believe is a bargaining issue. And that's something that we cannot do now because we're not prepared for that. So I am making a motion that we do not entertain Mr. Joseph. Sorry, Mr. Joseph. I don't, Mr. Joseph Brenner. No offense to you, but we're not going to have a discussion about negotiations about a contract that was closed March 31st here at this meeting. So I'd like to make that motion, and I can get a second, please.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Madam Chair, what is the exact motion again, Ms. Lanier? To not hear it or to hear it?
Careful when we vote. Let me restate it for the purpose of clarity. I believe Ms. Lanier is saying she's making a motion that we not hear from the representative of SEIU. A positive vote would mean that we're not hearing from him. A negative vote would mean we're hearing from him. So am I correct, Ms. Lanier? Yes. Ms.
Yes, you
Miller,
are correct.
seconding Ms. Miller Anderson?
I guess, yes, we're here.
We have a vote and a second. Madam Clerk, will you take the roll? A positive,
No,
a yes?
I did, who seconded? I didn't, that wasn't a second. I said, I understand what you're saying.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought it was a second. Do we have a
No,
second?
my position with this motion is that I am not prepared to negotiate, because what happens is that when Mr. Brenner, and all fairness to you, Mr. Brenner, when you present, I have to be able to ask you questions. I have to be able, and guess what? If I'm asking you questions, if I'm asking you about what's happening, we are negotiating a contract that's been closed. And I cannot do that tonight. I am not prepared for that tonight.
Does
Madam
anyone
Chair?
want to, Mr. Lawson?
If we can see if we have a second first, and then I'll make my comments.
Yeah. Do we have a second? Okay, we don't have a second.
Okay.
Mr. Lawson, do you want to make the opposing motion?
I'd like to make a motion to hear from a representative, Joseph Brenner, from SEIU, to present for 5 minutes on the points of what SEIU has.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
As long
I
as
want
we-
to second that based on information. I want to second it based on the fact that we also have Mr. Jack McLean here from the city's perspective. So if we're going to hear from Mr. Joseph, we also want to hear from Mr. McLean.
All right, Mr. Lawson, are you willing to modify your motion that we hear not only from Mr. Brenner, but from Mr. McLean?
Madam Chair, I have no problem with hearing from everyone that's going to put this to rest. I want to get this resolved instead of arguing about who can and cannot speak, because we've taken 15 minutes to have everybody discuss their points. So Mr. Brenner, Mr. McLean, Mr. Evans, and Ms. Nguyen, anybody else that wants to talk, please, let's put this to rest and let's get started.
Ms. Anthony?
I was just gonna say, Madam Chair, that Mr. McCoy seconded that motion, not Ms. Lanier. If
Okay.
Ms. Watson is amending the motion to hear from not only Mr. Brenner, also Mr. McLean, is that correct?
And capped at 5 minutes each, so that we both have the same time to present, and then finally to hear from Mr. Evans to close it out.
And Mr.
Thank-
McCoy, do you accept that as you maintain your second with that condition?
Yes, second.
Madam Clerk?
Councilperson McCoy,
Yes.
Councilperson Miller Anderson,
Yes, for the 5 minutes.
okay, Ms. Miller Anderson, you just doing it for the 5 minutes? Are you doing it for both of, yes to the motion, or?
Yes.
Okay. Councilperson Lanier,
No.
Pro Tem Lawson,
Yes.
Chair Botel.
No.
That motion is approved with councilpersons Lanier and Botel dissenting.
Ms. Miller
Madam
Anderson.
Chair, I just want to be clear. So I'm fine with them doing the 5 minute, and this is why. Because see, usually what would happen is they would come up as a 3 minute comment, public comment. That's what normally would happen. And they would be able to provide their voice from the union. And I want to be very clear. It's not, for me, it is not about, trying to silence anyone. It's a matter of doing things in order. A lot of this stuff has come to us blindly. I mean, if the man Mr. Brenner wanted to present, fine, let us know we have a presenter that's going to be presenting on their behalf. The other thing is provide us with the information ahead of time. I mean, nobody's trying to silence anyone, and, Mr. McCoy, I respect your position on a lot of the things that you're saying, but I just want to be very clear that, lodging the threats of, violating and this and that, for me, that doesn't move me, and that's not determining which way I go with it. I do want to present myself as being fair, but there's a way to do things as well. And, coming with these side presentations and catching people off guard, it's just it's just unnecessary. This thing was sent to us at 5:30. If they wanted us to have the presentation previously, they should have sent it earlier so that we could have seen it. And we would have known that he was going to be doing a presentation. We just looked up and Mr. Joseph was on the call. No one that I'm aware of, it seems like no one knew that he was going to be on here. And I'm just saying, just make sure that everybody is in the loop of what's taking place so nobody's put off guard. That's the only thing I'm saying. And I'm fine with hearing a 5 minute. And I did vote yes for 5 minutes because I don't think this is appropriate in the manner in which we have it set up. If it was a part of the backup, if we knew this person was going to be presenting, then fine. But, I'm all for it. But I do want to be very clear. I've heard from employees. I understand the issue. So I'm not dismissing anyone's position or how anyone feels about it. I get it and I understand that. But we have a lot of extra flair going on that I think is being added to it that, is taken away from what we're trying to do. So if we could just stay focused, then we'll be fine. I think everybody wants to do the right thing. So all of that other extra stuff, I don't think is necessary.
Thank you, Ms. Miller Anderson. I want to make a statement about this. I voted no because for the same reasons that you just articulated, we had no preparation. There was no backup at all on either the 5 o'clock agenda or the 5:30 agenda. And frankly, I agree with Ms. Lanier that it's tantamount to negotiating public. Now I have one more question for Ms. Nguyen. Ms. Nguyen, does the council chair have the ability to control the meeting?
That's a very broad question, Chair Botel. Depends on.
Does the council chair have the authority to call on members and recognize them before they speak?
Yes.
Thank you. Does the council chair have the ability to ask members to stop speaking because she wants to call the question or move the conversation along?
Anyone can call the question, yes.
Or move the conversation. Thank you. Ms. Miller Anderson.
Just one quick thing. Your voice, you can't hear you a lot of times. So a lot of times when you're trying to get control of the meeting, your voice is not there. I see you, but I don't think you're being outnumbered because so maybe you put your earpiece back in.
Madam Chair, try your headphones. Try to put your earpiece in.
Yeah.
That works.
And Madam Chair, I just want to say one quick question, just one quick thing. I agree with Kashama Miller Anderson, Council Miller Anderson, and with you, Chair Botel, is that I don't have a problem. If this agenda was 20 items long, I have no problem with that. None at all. My problem with this is that I've said this time and time again. If I'm going to have a meeting with you guys, and we're going to be talking about what's going to happen, I need to be prepared for it. I need to be able to know that Mr. Brenner was going to talk or Mr. McLean was going to be here. There is no way in the world that when you put this agenda item on the agenda that you could have just said you could have said in the agenda item, we're going to have a 5-minute presentation from SEIU. We're going to have a rebuttal from our representative. We're going to have some conversation from our city manager. It's easy to put on the agenda. It was nothing I could have done with it. But to have this come to us at this late date, to be able to negotiate this now, is not how we do business.
Thank you, Ms. Lanier. Is this sound better?
Yes, much.
Okay, good. Thank you. So, Madam Clerk, would you set the timer, and Mr. Brennan, would you please begin your presentation?
All right, thank you. This is in relation to the pandemic pay policy in a public comment that I had made last time. It was not part of the agenda item when it was read into the record last meeting you held, but I wanted to illustrate some of the things to reference what was talked about before. And I'm going to share my screen with everybody in just a second here. So if you can see. Can you see my screen now? No?
Yeah, yeah.
Yes. Okay, so we described why this pandemic pay for Riviera Beach is quite it's frankly unfair to the members of our unions, police and fire and the PMSA, which submitted a comment directly related to this earlier today. It's also bad public policy. It was illustrated before that, we did not bring this policy up. We did not ask for any special pay. This conversation simply started because management implemented their own specific management only policy. And it's, like I said before, it's a policy that is only in Riviera Beach. We've not seen it in any other entity across Florida. We represent 9 other cities across Florida and several other public systems. So the only city right now doing a special pay is Riviera for management or for non-represented folks. However, one of the things that was mentioned in this is a fallacy, is that the only city keeping people whole is Riviera Beach right now for those who are not reporting there full time. That is categorically incorrect. Across the state and especially in Palm Beach County, we've got many of our entities, City of Boca Raton, as you see on the screen in front of you, Delray Beach, Boynton Beach, Village of Palm Springs, Palm Beach Gardens, as well as the Palm Beach County School District, the largest employer in the area, that is keeping people whole, whether they can report for 1 hour a week or 40, right? And again, I want to reiterate, we've never asked even for 1 second for anybody who is not physically reporting to work in the field to receive any special pay. I wanted to make sure that is crystal clear to the council. So Riviera is claiming that the city is the only entity that is keeping people whole for not reporting is just factually incorrect. It is across the state. Every city I've seen is doing this to this state right now. Now, obviously, as the outbreak continues, that might change. But right now, Riviera Beach is actually doing what I would believe and what I would argue is the right thing in keeping people whole. We would love to connect you to any members of management from these cities that we talk to on a regular basis. In our conversations with Mr. Evans and his staff, we've offered that up many times. Obviously, there are some entities that are doing specific pandemic pays for their employees who are reporting. Palm Springs, Jupiter, Boca Raton, Palm Beach County Schools are some of them. We are in negotiations with another on exactly what that pay would be. And one highlight we really wanted to show management is that City of Boca Raton is explicitly not paying management or any workers who are not reporting in the field, meaning if you work from home, you make your regular pay. Boca Raton is doing it for only those who are deemed essential in reporting, and those happen to be, many of our frontline workers, a very similar group of workers that we have in the city of Riviera Beach. Regarding the FEMA reimbursement, and then here's the only city in Florida that is a management-only pandemic pay policy. Riviera Beach is standing alone in that aspect. I want to make that crystal clear to the council. The claims that were made, I don't want to go into them too much. I don't have time for it. I would say that the city banking that FEMA will reimburse every bit of this pay, that's a very big risk that the city is taking because a lot of that will not be reimbursed by FEMA. And as well as those who are on the phone know. It's a very cumbersome process and it might not cover every bit. And the last thing we want is for our frontline city workers to face layoffs or possible furloughs similar to what happened a decade ago if the city were to spend resources now that they can't get back for later. So that being said, this is just poor policy and it is the only place across the entire state of Florida we've seen a management only or a non-represented worker only specific special pay program. I don't know if I have any more time left, but I'm of course available for any conversations. I welcome Mr. McLean dealt with him for many years, good man. Any back and forth dialogue with Mr. Evans and Mr. McLean as well. In fact, just having a conversation about this has been what we have asked for 3-4 weeks ago.
Fine.
Mr. Brenner. Thank you.
Can he take his presentation also? We can all get back on the screen.
Thank you. Mr. Evans, did you want to speak now, or do you want Mr. McLean to speak?
If we can have Ms. Matumba and Mr. McLean speak. Ms. Matumba has been instrumental in crafting the policy and can speak to some of the items, and then Mr. McLean can conclude Ms. Matumba's comments.
Ms. Matumba.
Good evening, everyone. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay. So a lot of the information I know has already been shared with the council, but just to provide a brief reiteration. So the pandemic policy was first created on March 20th. That's when the first version was enacted. And it was modeled after the disaster pay policy, which was created in 2005. It's my understanding that under the disaster pay policy, that folks who were working and the work that they're doing, that those activities were related to the disaster, were paid time and a half. And that is the same intent of the current policy. And so if you have employees that are coming to work and they're doing activities that are related to the pandemic and they're outside of their normal activities, then under the pandemic pay policy that was modeled after disaster pay policies, then the reasoning would be that they might get the time and a half. It's my understanding that the folks that are coming to work are doing their usual activities. And so they aren't doing anything that is different than what they would normally be doing. On April 1st, the policy was amended, and it was amended to include the First Families Coronavirus Response Act that provides 6 categories where employees have a bank of time that is federally provided for a number of reasons. So there are certain reasons where they would get 80 hours of pay at 100%. There are other reasons where they would only get 2/3 of their rate of pay. And that was the main reason why the April 1st amendment or the revision occurred. It was always the intent of the city that every employee remain in a paid status and in a status where they weren't drawing down from their accruals. So that's kind of a little bit of a background information. Mr. Evans, is there anything else you would like me to cover regarding the policy?
No, I think that suffices. Mr. McLean, if you had some additional remarks.
At what point do we ask questions? Because I have something specific to what she asked.
Well, I think we can allow you to ask a question, Mr. McCoy. Without getting too, knowing you'll stretch it for, yes, you start with one. Why don't you start with one and see how it goes?
Ms. Matumba, and I don't have one question. I'm going to tell you that now. Ms. Matumba, you spoke and you said that this policy was drafted or styled after the 2005 disaster pay policy, correct?
That's what I said.
And that disaster pay policy requires that if you're working related to the disaster, you'll be getting paid time and a half.
That's my understanding of how the disaster pay practices policy works, yes.
What does that mean? That's your understanding. So you don't know for certain? Have you not reviewed?
I have reviewed the policy, Councilperson McCoy, and that, yes, that is what the policy states.
So how is this exactly styled or even in comparison when much of what is occurring now with the 70 individuals aren't exactly related to COVID-19 and they're receiving time and a half? So where do you draw the comparison or the analogy of saying that it was styled after that?
Can you repeat that, sir?
can you explain how you draw the analogy of this was styled after the 2005 disaster pay policy when they're substantially different? You said 2005, you have to be doing something exactly or directly related to the disaster. In this
Correct.
2020 pandemic pay policy, you don't have to be doing something related to the pandemic, and you're paid regardless of whether or not you're doing something related to COVID-19. Where's the analogy
No,
there?
that's not what I said, sir. What I said as far as the collective bargaining, the union members, under the disaster pay practices policy, they would have been paid time and a half for work that they were doing that was related to the disaster and outside of their normal job activities. And so what I said was that same intent was placed in the pandemic pay policy. So for instance, if
How
you
is that
have
the case?
employees,
They're not being
I'm
paid.
sorry, sir, can I finish my statement, please? I just wanted to finish. Is that okay? So what I said was under the pandemic pay practices policy was that we had employees that were working outside of their normal job activities. They're doing something related to the pandemic that was outside of their normal activities. The intent would be that they would get time and a half. It's my understanding that we don't have employees that are working outside of their normal job activities and related to the pandemic.
Okay, well.
Did I clarify that for you?
No, you didn't. In fact, it got even more confusing because we do have employees that's doing things that are outside of their normal activities, like the twice a week distribution or the assisting with the COVID-19 testing, and they're not being paid time and a half. So how is this any relation to 2005 disaster pay policy?
I was not, to be honest, sir, I was not aware that there were other employees that were doing that.
I got one more question. So the 2005 disaster pay policy, did it provide for these 70 positions that we currently have to be paid time and a half for every single hour that's worked? That's irrespective of whether or not it's related to the actual disaster?
Yes, sir, it does.
Okay, so this is the problem. I've never seen that. And I even went back after I heard Mr. Randy Sherman last week at our Wednesday city council meeting to say this was following the 2005 FEMA guidelines. And I'm lost because I've spent substantial time and I also had someone assisting me. We couldn't locate that. And I don't see how we can suggest that this is relative to 2005 when we don't even have 2005 to go off of, and it's definitely not codified in our code of ordinances.
I can provide that policy for you, sir.
So where is it at? Where's the policy?
I received it from Human Resources. That's where I received the policy from.
But am I correct in saying the human resource policy has been codified inside of the code of ordinances? So you're saying there's something else that exists out there with additional policies that's not in our code of ordinances that speaks to pay?
The only policy that I'm aware of, sir, is the disaster pay practices policies that was supplied to me by HR when the pandemic began. And that was the policy that was used to create the pandemic pay policy.
Okay, last question, and now yield, and I will respectfully ask for a follow-up later. This 2005 disaster pay policy, do you know the exact date it was adopted?
I do not know the exact date, sir, but
okay.
I can get that.
I reclaim my time. One more question. Do you know who adopted the policy? Was this something that was done by the city manager, or was this a city council decision?
If my memory serves me correctly, it was approved by the city council and the city manager, but I would have to go back and look at it to be sure, but I'm pretty sure it was approved by the city manager. I'm a little bit shakier on if it was approved by the council, but I will get that information to you, sir.
Well, before we move on, is there somebody on the phone that can speak to how this 2005 disaster pay policy was adopted? Okay, well, since nobody knows this, then I yield back my time. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Ms. Nguyen, did you want to speak? No, okay, thought I saw your hand. All right, Mr. McLean, Shirley, Ms. Lanier, did you want to speak?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that, first of all, we're in a meeting now with people who I never, number one, I don't know. Number two, I was not prepared for conversations with Mr. Brennan, Mr. McLean, Ms. Matumba for this issue at all. And that means that, guess what we're doing now? We're negotiating a contract right now. And I just want to say that it's basically, we're talking about apples and oranges here. We're talking about a situation where, you're making a comparison about other municipalities. The COVID-19 has not hit this district or this area or this city the way it has done other cities. So we're really comparing apples and oranges here. We are in a position now where we're talking about changing a contract, period. And those are the things that be negotiated, especially when the contract is closed. Those are things that should be negotiated, among the Mr. McLean's, among the Mr. Brennan's, to be negotiated between them, and then comes to the council. But we're negotiating for or against them now. And this is something that I really, and as I said before, there are people on this call I was not expecting. There's information. Mr. Brennan submitted and went through a whole PowerPoint. I have not seen that before. And those are the things I'm talking about. If we're going to have discussions, everything that Mr. Brennan presented, Mrs. Matumba's response to that, Ms. Wynn's response to that, all of that should have been provided to us before we got to this meeting and not during a meeting.
Thank you, Ms. Lanier. Mr. Brennan, I see your hand raised, but I'd like for Mr. McLean to finish up that portion, then we'll go back to some questions. I'll come right back to you. Mr. McLean.
May I just interrupt for one second?
Who's speaking? Ms. Matumba.
Ms. Matumba, thank you. I just wanted to look up that answer for Mr. McCoy right away. So there are two policies that are disaster pay practices policies. One refers to non-exempt employees and one refers, I'm sorry, sir?
I had difficulties. Can you repeat that?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me better now?
Yes.
Okay, so there are two disaster pay practices policies, one that pertains to non-exempt employees and the other one that pertains to exempt employees. The policy that pertains to exempt employees, the effective date is August 11th, 2005. It was approved by the Director of Human Resources. Looks like that was Ms. Dorothea Perry. It was also approved by the city manager. Looks like that person was a Mr. Williams, Mr. William Wilkins or Williams, Wilkins. I think. Wilkins, thank you for the correction. And I'll go ahead and forward these policies to you right now, sir. The non-exempt disaster pay practices policy, the effective date on that is October 21st of 2005, and the same signatories are on this policy. So I will go ahead and forward those to you. And I will forward them to the rest of the council as well.
Thank you. Mr. McLean.
Yes, Madam Chair, I'll be brief on it, and to the whole council members. So I would like to kind of just go ahead and let me just piggyback off of what normally happens with the policies, and then I'll talk to the points that were raised by Mr. Brennan, who I've had a chance to negotiate and work with over the years, and I have the same high regard for him as he mentioned for me. I will state that those policies that were just articulated, or the practice has been that the HR department would design and do those policies, and they would come back to the council and for the council to approve. So I would suggest that we perhaps go back and have the clerk or someone else search for that, because I know that was the way we did the furlough policy. That was also looked at and finally, I think, signed up on by the council too. As to these meetings being public meetings, yes, they are indeed, as Mr. Brennan said, public meetings. Negotiations are public, and every session we have is public. But this forum is not designed for negotiation. In fact, 447 lays out the format for having negotiation, and it has the chief executive officer, the city manager, leading up that negotiation effort with guidance from the council and we go through a process of negotiating the exchange of documents back and forth. Once the manager and the union reaches an accommodation on an issue, those are bundled up in a package, and those come back to the commission for the commission or the council here to sign off on those items. That is the process. But yes, those individual processes of exchanging documents is public. But this form that we're in now is not the structure that 447 lays out for negotiations. Yes, this is a form of negotiation because we're talking for matters that are outside of the contract. The contract has been struck. The parties have bargained for it. I did speak to Mr. Brennan. I mean, let me just say that we actually had a meeting with HR and a number of other people to talk about this whole issue early on, maybe about 3 to 4 weeks ago. In that meeting, Mr. Brennan, I asked the question, Mr. Brennan, are you saying that this is part of the negotiations? He says, no, it is not part of the negotiation, because he realizes as an experienced person that the contract does not provide or cover this. Now, unlike the PBA, Mr. Brennan, I didn't put my hand up. It's kind of distracting if you just wait to let me finish the presentation. Unlike the PBA contract did not even encompass the emergency policy referenced earlier by Ms. Matumba. It was not part of the contract. It was not contemplated. And my understanding is from the PBA, when they actually sent the letter to the manager raising that issue, that they have not actively pursued that issue with it. They certainly have not been contacting me, and I've been in contact with the president, with the chief negotiator of the table, since we've negotiated this current contract, and no one has raised the issue of the pandemic pay policy after that initial letter that was sent out by Mr. Kazanjian. So just wanted to kind of speak to that issue on bargaining, the structure and the public nature of bargaining. The other thing I did want to point out is there are other employers who have policies that cover the executive personnel. So the city is not alone in that. So there are other places, both county and some cities, that will cover executive personnel as well as others in terms of extra compensation is what we're talking about, overtime.
Are we at 5 minutes, Mr. McLean?
Sorry. Yes, sir.
Are we at 5 minutes?
I hope not, but I'm glad to yield. Okay, I'm trying to speak within the time.
We're way beyond it.
Excuse me, Mr. McCoy. Madam Clerk, are we at 5 minutes?
No, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Deduct the last couple of seconds. Thank you.
Okay, now I'll get outside this very quickly, Councilman McCoy. So the last thing that I just wanted to go ahead and point out about it is that the SEIU actually, outside of all the other unions, has protection here, and that is through the policy. Now the issue is one of relatedness, and that's what I heard before, whether or not it's related to a disaster, related to COVID. There are ways that you can be related to COVID. I'm aware that there have been extra sanitation policies that have been implemented by some cities and some government, where people are going around actually sanitizing the place on a regular basis, doorknobs, wiping down counters and all of that. That's directly related to that. So it's a relatedness issue, just as it is with the disaster, or whether or not it is related to the hurricane for us up here on this end, Hurricane Michael, and for you, a different hurricane. So that issue is just one of relatedness as to whether or not the policy is triggered in terms of, the extra compensation. The other issue was one raised about FEMA. Yes, there is the opportunity to get money from FEMA. FEMA is not an easy process, as Councilman McCoy stated. But I don't know if I'm not sure. I didn't draft the policy. Ms. Matumba worked on the policy. But the policy itself, as to whether or not you can get FEMA, is an opportunity for you to recover those funds. But it's still a policy decision of the council as to whether or not you want to go ahead and have the policy in place, whether you get money from FEMA or you do not get money from FEMA. So the form here, and I mentioned to Mr. Brennan before, the form here, and he has the right to speak for it, but it's just not the forum for trying to negotiate something different in the contract. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. I think that's the time. I'm going to call on Mr. Brennan, and then Mr. Lawson, and then Ms. Lanier. Mr. Brennan. Briefly, Ms. Miller Anderson was very clear about us taking 5 minutes apiece. So let's make this very brief, and then we'll hear from Mr. Evans. Mr. Brennan.
Yeah, so I wanted to just reiterate, the union is not making a proposal to the city council that we demand this be implemented. We're simply calling into question the efficacy of the city implementing a very specific pay policy for a very specific group of people who, as we all know, and it's been referenced and shown before, are not receiving such similar payments across the entire state. And I will say this, just to speak to that, to utter the claims on, bargaining. This is not bargaining. We recognize that. Each of the places that discuss this with us, City of West Palm Beach Schools, Delray, Boynton, Village of Palm Springs, Palm Beach Gardens, each brought this to our attention, even though we're in the same position as Riviera in the middle of a contract year, some of whom, like Boynton Beach, said there's nothing we can do. Some of whom said, hey, would you guys be interested in this? So it's simply a dialogue between the unions and having this conversation. Again, we know that this is not bargaining. It's an issue of public fairness.
Thank you, Mr. Lawson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As Mr. McLean stated, that the negotiations will be done with our city manager with guidance from the council. So with us taking the opportunity to hear the points, and that's why I want to hear the points of all parties so that we can give the guidance to Mr. Evans so he can begin negotiations moving forward once the contract does come about. As of right now, we're hearing the points of why we're getting the emails, why there's a discrepancy with everyone through the city and our employees, why they're reaching out to us and moving forward. I understand, Ms. Lanier, that your concerns are the people that are on the call that we may not know. I didn't know Mr. Brenner was going to be on it. I'm glad Ms. Mutombo to give her points and Mr. McLean. But these are the times we have to take to actually hear the points and have the conversation. Due to sunshine, we don't have the opportunity to have these discussions outside of this. So I understand we could have put on the agenda that Mr. Brennan was going to speak on the points of what the union had to represent, but the same opportunity that we afforded Mr. Evans, I wanted us to allow or to take a vote so that we could hear from all sides, so we could educate ourselves on making a decision as policymakers. So I want us to stop trying to stifle the opinions and the voices of anyone and have the discussion when we have an opportunity so that we can move forward. Now, I understand your concern is simply just to have it on the agenda so you can be prepared. I completely agree with you there. And that's what we can do moving forward as a council, that before we take any outside presentations, let's make sure it's presented to the entire board so they can be ready and prepared for it. But I'm glad that they only took the 3 to 5 minutes to present, which is the normal time that they would be allotted if we were in a regular council meeting. So I'm glad that we could hear from everyone else. Go ahead, Dr. Patel.
Thank you, Mr. Lawson. Ms. Lanier.
I just wanted to say that, you can say what you want to say, but this is really bargaining here. It appears that Mr. Brennan says that there is not an issue with the policy that they're asking for in terms of providing pandemic pay or time and a half for his employees. Now, let me be clear. PMSA, SEIU, I have been a part of each of those unions in my professional career. So I understand, and I'm the first one to recognize and to say that the city employees are doing a wonderful job. And I know this to be true. I know that this city is functioning because of city employees, not because of me, not because of the council, but because of the people who work every single day for this city. But I want to be fair here. And to be fair, we're not going to go into negotiations with PMSA or with SEIU at this moment. It appears that the issue here is that the city manager enacted this policy and not the SEIU. That is not SEIU's bargaining chip. Your bargaining is closed. You cannot come in and tell us or tell the city manager how to do pandemic pay. And I understand your position. Trust me, Mr. Brennan. And I appreciate the fact that you are here tonight. I really do. I appreciate the fact that you're here tonight and that you're bringing up the issues of the people who are in SEIU, who are in PMSA. I really appreciate that. But because of the fact that we're in a position now that the city managers has enacted a pandemic policy pay, it's not about SEIU or PMSA pay. It's about the city managers pay. So let's be clear on that. Let's be clear about what the real issue here is tonight. And if we need to move further and, open negotiations, then so be it. but it is not the forum to do that tonight, because we've had conversations from the city manager, the city attorney has weighed in, the assistant city attorney has weighed in, Mr. McLean, who is our representative for the city, has weighed in, Mr. Brennan, you have weighed in. We are not saying that you are not correct. All we're saying is that we want to be prepared to be able to have a conversation about how we move forward with this issue. And please do not get me wrong. And I'm telling you, everybody knows that I'm all for city employees, because guess what? I am a county employee under PMSA. I was a city employee under SEIU. I know that when you are trying to do the best that you can, and people are coming in and saying that this person gets more than you get more, I understand that. But this is not the forum for it. So let us be clear about the fact that the issue here is the fact that the city manager made that pandemic pay policy, or at least ratified it among previous 2005 guidelines. So let's be clear about what's really going on here. And Mr. Lawson, Councilman Lawson, Councilman McCoy, I totally agree with you that we need to be able to figure out something here. But
thank you, Ms.
The way this is now, it's not going to happen tonight.
Thank you, Ms. Lanier. I think we should hear from Mr. Evans. It is 6:45. We have one more item on this agenda, and then we have a CRA meeting. So if we could just hear from Mr. Evans now, and we can then move along. Mr. Evans.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the council. We've heard comments from SEIU with respect to sample policies that they have provided us, which they provided us on, I believe, Wednesday, May 6th. We have had discussions with our finance director to look at some modification with respect to the pandemic pay policy, to look at something similar to other entities. Also, with regards to communications with the press, I can tell you I never reached out to them. They reached out to me. And if there is concerns with respect to employees that are doing COVID-related activities and they're not being compensated for that, then that's stuff that we need to know to ensure that they're compensated fairly and equitably. I think we should also not discount the fact that when we are compared to other entities, I could also do a listserv to the city managers group and find out additional information. Deerfield Beach had a similar policy to ours, and they sunsetted their policy. Also, the other side of it is the city of West Palm Beach is effectively keeping their employees whole because they're having them come into work, where in our situation, a lot of our employees are not coming into work. We also have situations where individuals are working 24 hours being compensated for 40 hours. So we're trying to, as it relates to our facilities, that you all are keenly aware of the challenge we have with our facilities. We cannot in good conscience bring our entire workforce back because our facilities are inadequate. So in the abundance of caution, we ask for our employees to go ahead and remain on a remote status and implemented a telecommuting policy that was never in place before, that gives the flexibility to people that are in the collective bargaining units as well as outside of the collective bargaining units. The intention was never to some nefarious plot to slight any employees. We've done a lot of great things to help facilitate our employees through this transition. Our employees, unlike other agencies, don't have to draw down their time to make them whole. Other government entities say you get 2/3 pay and you have to draw down your sick and vacation time to be whole. We have not implemented that. We have actually allowed for more flexibility than the CARES Act provides for. So we as an employer have done everything we can to separate as many people from being in some of those facilities because they were woefully inadequate for what we're going to try to do. With regards to your management team, the 70 employees that are on the list, there's no backup, there's no additional team. So when we ask for, when we look at some of our operations where we can go in an A shift, B shift, C shift, we don't have that particular depth. And the other thing I do want to point, and I'll close my comments, is we activated the same policy when we activated for Dorian. Everyone that was on that list, that is the 70 individuals that was called into question, it's the same exact activation and the same compensation that was rendered in Dorian back in 2019 when we did our activation. So we have modeled the policy. The intent was to create the policy similar to the policy in 2005, and nobody anticipated how to be able to address this. And so it's a ebbs and flows. We have a conversation with SEIU on Saturday to have some discussions with them, and then hopefully bring back something that looks at the organization holistically. And we have weekly conference calls with the employees. If there's ever a conversation or a concern, they know that they can approach me, and we don't retaliate in this agency.
Thank you,
Madam
Mr. Chairman.
Chair?
Yeah,
Madam Chair, no, Mr. Brenner cannot speak again.
No,
That
I'm
is
not,
5
I'm not,
minutes. Okay.
Ms. Lanier, I'm not calling on him. Mr. Evans, I have a question. Is it your intent then to meet with SEIU on this coming Saturday to begin to work out some of these issues that their membership has raised?
SEIU, PMSA, PBA, and IFF, all of them, yes.
So you're going to meet with all of them. So you're going to attempt to resolve all of these issues on this coming Saturday?
On this Saturday or sooner, but I should be able to have some clarity to provide to the board prior to your meeting on Wednesday.
On Wednesday. Okay, great. Ms. Miller Anderson had a question.
And I know you just addressed it, but I just wanted to make it clear that, you know, with Mr. Brennan on the call, if we were in the chambers, he would do his presentation and then that would be it. It wouldn't, there's no back and forth going on. And so we just got to make sure we don't deviate from how we normally do things. And that is not appropriate for Mr. Brennan to continue to go back and forth. He did his presentation and then that's it. Okay, thank you.
So unless council, I'm going to call on Mr. McCoy, and then we should, with the understanding that Mr. Evans is going to have these conversations with all of the associated parties, I'm satisfied that this process is ongoing and that some resolution will be found. Mr. McCoy.
Okay, well, it's not that simple because I'm not even speaking from the collective bargaining standpoint. I have some questions about the policy itself. You know, I brought this up last week and we chose to not finish the subject because of the time that passed. But Mr. Evans, I'm doing a side by side, but even before I get to that portion of the comparison, you know, I'm looking at the memo and I don't understand, like, it appears that we are now not only giving time and a half, but we're doing time and a half on top of regular base pay for employees who report to work and perform hurricane-related tasks, is what it says here. Received, in addition, employees receive base pay at straight time. So, like, I don't understand how that's possible that we're not just paying time and a half, we're basically paying double. And I'm referring to the page 3 of the 44-page memo that you sent us. So is it?
Which 44-page memo? Because I've sent you a couple of them.
On the 27th.
Okay.
And it says the pandemic pay policy was modeled after the long-standing FEMA-approved disaster pay policy. And then number 4 reads, full-time employees who work and perform hurricane-related tasks are compensated for all time worked at time and 1/2, period. In addition, employees receive base pay at straight time. Can you clarify what that means? Because I don't know if that's the case here, but I'm trying to understand how is that portion relative to the pandemic pay policy now when you're referencing the hurricane-related tasks?
Ms. Matumba, correct me if I'm wrong, it's the same, I think the wording is different, but it's the exact same model with regards to...
It's a similar model. Employees that are working, essentially the 70 employees that we're talking about, are only getting paid time and a half. No one should be getting paid time and a half plus their regular rate. That is how it is outlined in the disaster pay practices policy, that it was time and a half for actual hours worked plus their regular rate. That is not how it is though in the pandemic pay policy. It's only time and a half for actual hours worked.
So it's reference here. Am I not understanding something? Number 4, page 3, the April 27th. Well, it was received on April 27th.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure which
What,
document
what
you're
memo,
referring
Mr.
to.
Councilman McCoy, what memo are you talking about?
It's, excuse me, Ms. Lanier, it's pandemic pay policy update, April 27th. And he's talking about, and I'll read item number 4, full-time employees who report to work and perform hurricane-related tasks are compensated for all time worked at time and a half. In addition, employees receive base pay at straight time. And he wants
So
That's for hurricane.
If I'm clear, that all that pretty much means is double time.
I think what Ms. Matumba is trying to say, Mr. McCoy, is that she's referenced this in this memo because that was the hurricane policy. Am I right, Ms. Matumba?
That's correct. That's the hurricane policy. That's not under the pandemic pay policy.
Pandemic pay policy.
It's similar,
Okay.
but that is where there is a difference.
Okay, so this question I also have. So I was looking at the memo that I guess the pandemic pay, I'm sorry, the disaster pay policies from 2005, both of them. And I think that's right around the time when we had all of those hurricanes. And my question is, why is it that, well, my first question is, were we under a state of emergency during that time? Is why this is deferred to the manager?
That I cannot answer, sir. I was not here in 2005, and I don't feel comfortable providing an answer to that question.
Okay, well, perhaps I should ask this question. Mr. Evans, under what authority do you have the ability to create these policies?
It was consistent with the actions and the policies that were adopted by previous administrators as citywide policies. And I did have the conversation with legal with regards to citywide policies from an administrative standpoint, that was within the scope and responsibility of the administrator.
And the conversation yielded in what? She said that you do have the ability to do that?
That is correct, sir.
Okay, so if we decide hypothetically that we don't believe that this policy is good for the city and we choose to disagree, how would we do that? Is that through a legislative action by making a motion and a vote?
Yes.
I'm
Yes,
asking
sir.
the
Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, if that's true, how is it that in the same fashion, like I'm looking at the list that you provided responsive to the public records request, you guys as administrators have no entitlement to this, correct? Because this is outside of your contract, right?
The pandemic pay policy?
Correct. Well, I'm speaking to Mr. Evans and
Okay.
Mr. Evans' contract, but yeah, you can certainly answer that question if you know the answer, Ms. Nguyen.
Yes, for instance, my contract says that the city shall provide Ms. Nguyen with all of the benefits.
I'm speaking to his contract because
Oh,
I
I'm
haven't
sorry.
been through yours yet, but clearly I'm trying to understand how is that he can unilaterally, basically exponentially at the rate of what I'm looking at, $60,000, give himself additional pay outside of his contract. And how is that okay? And under what authority?
I'm not sure, but I believe that same provision that's in my contract is in Mr. Evans' contract, but I'd have to get back to you on that.
Mr. Evans?
I don't have my employment contract in front of me.
Okay, so
Madam Chair.
Mr. McCoy, will you yield to Ms. Lanier?
yes.
Thank you.
Mr.
Ms.
McCoy,
Lanier.
do you know that we spent 4, 5, 6 days on Mr. Evans's contract, and everything that is a part of his contract, we should really know because we spent almost a week and a half on his contract to be able to bring it for a vote. That's the first thing. Number 2, he is the city manager. He has the right to be able to enact policies for us to be able to say yay or nay. He cannot do
That's not what
anything.
happened here. We didn't get a chance to say.
Let me finish now. He cannot do anything. He cannot do anything that we do not approve of. So you have to
This
be
is the
clear.
case right here, Miss Lanier.
Well, tell me your case, Mr. McCoy. I'm not following. Just tell me.
That's
what you
exactly
mean.
what I'm trying to ask. If you can allow me to finish.
Okay, go ahead.
And you're right. We should know the contract, and I would defer to perhaps Ms. Miller Anderson, who actually was very much involved. But I'm actually looking at it, and I'm just understanding: is this something that we should expect anytime the manager determines, or was it the declaration of a state of emergency that gave him the ability to do this, or like going forward?
The state of emergency, Mr. McCoy.
Wait, hold on, Ms. Lanier. I would respectfully ask the manager to ask that question because that's just what I asked him a moment ago. And he deferred to saying Ms. Nguyen said that they can do that. And I don't understand how we can set a contract because if I tell you right now that we were to vote unanimously or by majority vote that we want to end this pandemic pay policy citywide, Mr. Evans nor Ms. Dawn Nguyen has any ability or recourse legally to come after the city because it's not in their contract in the beginning. Am I correct, Ms. Nguyen?
No, say it again, Mr. McCoy. Say it again. Let me understand that.
Wait. Let me rephrase this question, Ms. Nguyen.
Yeah. Let me hear it again.
Okay, let me finish, Ms. Lanier.
No, I'm trying to understand you because I'm following you, but I can't really understand what you're saying.
Okay, I'm gonna say it slow. All right. I'm looking at Section 2 of the city manager's employment contract, and it's entitled Salary and Evaluation. And it goes on to say his base salary is $200,000.
Okay.
Letter B says the city agrees to increase said base salary and or other benefits of the city manager in such amounts and to such extents as the city council may determine desirable on the basis of an annual performance evaluation of the city manager, period. Such evaluation shall be in such form as the city council deems appropriate using goals and objectives established by the city council and city manager within 60 days of the city manager's date of employment, period. Said goals and objectives to be amended by the parties as necessary, period. An evaluation shall take place annually, measuring progress towards meeting the goals and objectives, period. Section C, on or before May 1st, 2020, and thereafter annually, the city manager shall initiate the evaluation process on such approved goals and objectives from the applicable rating period by submitting to the council a self-appraisal of said performance. The appraisal shall address performance related to each of the goals and objectives agreed upon for said period's performance. Letter D, nothing in this section shall require the city to increase the base salary or other benefits of the city manager, period. However, the city manager shall be entitled to receive across the board / cost of living increases that may be granted to the general employees from time to time, period. Furthermore, the city's failure to conduct the scheduled evaluation should not constitute noncompliance with a material provision on the part of the city manager. So that ends the salary section. So I'm going to restate my question. If we choose by majority vote to terminate the pandemic pay policy, does the city manager or the city attorney have any, well, I can't speak to the city attorney because I don't have a contract in front of me, have any recourse against the city for monies at this point that would be due under the pandemic pay policy that is not in the contract?
But Mr. McCoy.
Wait, excuse me, Ms. Lanier. To whom are you addressing that question, Mr. McCoy?
It's when.
Okay.
Because clearly what I'm not understanding is...
Excuse me, Mr. McCoy. Ms. Lanier, will you let him finish that, please?
No, go
right, because here's my question. At any point, does the city manager decide to increase his salary outside of what's inside of the written verbiage in the contract? Because clearly, when I'm seeing a spreadsheet of pandemic pay just shy of $60,000 for less than 2 months. So my question is this something, and Shirley Lanier, Councilwoman Lanier, please, I want to make sure that I understand this from Mr. Evans and Ms. Nguyen, because I asked the question before, and the answer was the city manager has the authority. So what you're saying to me, Ms. Nguyen and Mr. Evans, is he has the authority to arbitrarily and unilaterally decide when his salary increases under a pandemic pay or any other policy that he decides to adopt?
City manager has the has the authority to adopt policies for the good of the city. That's the first thing. If you all want to make a motion and vote to end the pandemic pay policy, the pandemic pay policy ends.
Okay, but my question is, this proposal that I'm suggesting to you right now, the pandemic pay proposal, is not called for in the manager's contract.
That's correct, not specifically because it wasn't developed. We didn't have a pandemic pay policy.
Well, any disaster policy for that matter, the 2005, if we rely on the 2005 disaster pay policy, would he be able to increase his salary based on the 2005 disaster pay policy?
Yes, because Section D in his contract says that the city manager shall be entitled to receive across the board or cost of living increases that may be granted to general employees from time to time.
But it's not.
That would include the disaster pay policy. It is.
But Ms. Nguyen, the general employees are those employees that are in a part of these collective bargaining agreements. Am I not correct? Because when you do across the board COLA increases, isn't that a part of the negotiation through SEIU and PF SMA and IAFF and PBA?
Yes, those are negotiated. And at that time, generally what has happened in the past is that the manager would be granted the higher of whatever bargaining unit receives as a
I'm not speaking generally, I'm
across the board living
contract, Ms. Nguyen. Because here's the problem. If we let it go this time and we recover and everything goes back to normal, November of 2020, does the manager have the ability and under what authority can we have this situation occur again where he's getting more than what the contract calls for? Under what circumstances, what I'm asking? A declaration by the manager himself?
1 minute.
I don't know what November 2020, what that references to.
Any date in the future.
In the event we have a disaster, a hurricane, yes, the manager is covered under the disaster pay policy.
So, and he'll be entitled to that?
Yes.
Even though it's not a cost of living increase? Because here's what I'm saying. You can't do it for one and not do it for the other. So just like we draw a reference, and I know I heard Ms. Lanier and I also heard Mr. McLean refer to, we're not in SEIU's bargaining right now. It's closed. And for that matter, we're not in the contract negotiation with the manager. So in the same fashion, you can't tell employees who are bound by a contract under SEIU that their bargaining is closed, but we allow the manager, who also is under a contract, to be able to increase his salary. I don't want to just say increase it exponentially. Like, how do you, I don't understand how you can argue both cases.
Mr. McCoy, Councilman McCoy, can I just say one thing? Please,
1 minute, Ms. Lanier. Mr. McCoy, are you about?
I'm looking for an answer. Like, how does that work? Like,
can I say one thing, Mr. McCoy?
I'm going to recognize Ms. Lanier. She has a question, Ms. Lanier.
I think that I understand what you're saying, Councilman McCoy. I do. I really do. But the policy that Mr. Evans and everybody else considered to be executive staff is under the state of emergency clause.
I asked that question first.
But listen, if we want to delete that, if we don't want to pay them that, we have to kill the state of emergency clause first.
Wait, Ms. Lanier, that's not the answer I got from the manager. I asked under what authority. Mr. Evans, he referred to Ms. Nguyen and said he had a conversation with her and she agreed that it was within his purview. She didn't reference the state of an emergency. So that's what I'm saying.
Right, the directors get it, and all others get it. The union gets it for the time worked over 40 hours.
Madam Chair, if I may.
Excuse me, Mr. Evans.
It's all under the auspice of a pandemic. We're talking about a pandemic. We're currently in a pandemic. So when the disaster pay policy is implemented, it's implemented when there's a disaster. Pandemic pay is for when there's a pandemic. So it's exclusive to those particular situations. If the city council has some concerns with regards to those policies, those are things that we can look to modify, change, adapt, rewrite, etc. The other side of it is suspend, and we have actually, based on the policy that was adopted in 2005, have received reimbursements from FEMA associated with that policy. And
But
so
it's
we
not,
have,
not the policy, Mr. Evans.
Mr. McCoy, can you let him finish,
I'm trying
please,
to find
Mr.
out
McCoy?
if you're going to answer the question,
Mr.
or you
McCoy,
are Ms. Wynn, and not a person that I mean, we're city council members, and I'm trying to get some understanding. Like, at what point can this happen again? Does it
Mr.
have to be a
Evans?
declaration of a state of emergency, or is this something, Ms. Wynn, that the manager can choose to do unilaterally? Just like that's why I draw a reference back to 2005 to ask, was this done during a state of emergency? Was the 2005 disaster policy, was that done by city council, or was it done by administration? So, like, you're not going to sit here and tell me that we got two agreements. The manager can enjoy the benefits of the pandemic pay policy, even though he's under a contractual agreement, but the SEIU members can't enjoy the benefits of pandemic pay policy because they're under agreement. You have two similar things. And you know what? I don't really want to put, and I'm not trying to put us in a situation of I got you, but like, I would like for us to be fair and consistent. And if it requires us to go back and revisit this, I think it's important, but you can't use this contract thing on one hand and not on the other. And I'm still waiting on the answer. Under what
The disaster pay policy was adopted in 2005, signed by Bill Wilkins and Ms. Perry, which leads me to believe that it did not go to City Council. It was in October 21st, 2005, which was around the time of Hurricane Wilma. And a year or a couple years after Hurricanes Francis and Jean. So I would believe, not having been here then, that it was adopted pursuant to that. Just like the pandemic pay policy was adopted pursuant to this pandemic, something we've never seen before.
Reclaim my time. So I would ask you, can you go back and bring us something in writing that would explain the disparate treatment and what entitlement the manager has, not just in this situation, but going forward? Because literally, we're in South Florida. I think there was already a tropical disturbance, if I'm not mistaken, that have came up on the radar. We're inevitably going to have storms and hurricanes. And I don't want to have a situation where I keep getting people to tell me the same exact thing, that the manager is enjoying a benefit, even though he's a contractual employee, just like SEIU members, and they're not being treated the same. That's just simple. I want that in writing to say that this
so
is.
what do you want, Councilman McCoy?
Ms. Lanier, wait a minute, Ms. Lanier.
So,
Mr. McCoy, my understanding is that Mr. Evans is going to meet with all of the association entities.
No. I'm not talking about. We're not just discussing the bargaining.
No. I'm not either. Okay, you're talking about
contracts, right?
You're talking about a disparity in treatment, and it's my understanding, Mr. Evans, correct me if I'm wrong, that you're going to address this disparity when you meet with these entities. Am I right?
No, that's not what I'm asking for.
I'm not asking you, Mr. McCoy. Mr. Evans.
I'm literally asking the question I haven't gotten the answer to. And you're trying to manipulate what I'm asking, and I think you're
absolutely. I'm not manipulating you, Mr. McCoy. I'm trying to get an answer from Mr. Evans now, and so are you, Mr. Evans.
Clearly, Ms. Wynn is probably the person that's going to be best suited to answer this question. I want an explanation in writing how Mr. Evans can enjoy the benefits of the pandemic pay policy as a contractual employee, but the other contractual employees don't have that ability to do it. And under what circumstances?
Mr. McCoy, the city manager has the authority under the pandemic pay policy.
Let's let Ms. Wynn answer that.
Hell, I've been asking for 20 minutes.
Oh, that's going to take some research. I was trying to get some clarification on the question, and I believe it's what entitlement does the manager have to enjoy benefits of the pandemic pay policy as a contractual employee when other contractual employees, and by that you mean bargaining members, don't have, correct?
Yes. And I want to make sure, because first it was stated by Mr. Evans that he consulted with you and you guys determined that it was something that was within his discretion as the manager, which brings up a completely other separate conflict of interest concern that I have. But I just want to first resolve, is it the discretion of the manager? Is it the state of emergency? Is it a disaster? Like, what exactly is it? Because I gave you the date of November 2020, just for example purposes. If we say November 2023 or November 2023, does this something that we can expect that people are going to knock on our personal doors at home to tell us about the manager getting a benefit as a contractual employee that's not enjoyed by everybody else? Is that something that I guess we established what I'm asking for, Ms. Wynn?
Yes, I understand the question.
Okay, that's all I have. Thank you, Madam Chair. I yield back.
Thank you. It is 7:13 p.m. We have one other item on this agenda. I have been informed that Mr. Scott Evans is very ill. He was ill earlier in the day. He thought he was better, but he's not feeling well at all. So Ms. Jenkins is going to take that meeting for him. But I'm wondering if it is the will of the council to put this second item, to deal with it now, or to have our CRA meeting and then deal with it after. Can I hear some feedback from folks about how they want to deal with this, the fact that it's 7:14 and our CRA meeting was supposed to start 14 minutes ago? Let's start with
Madam Chair, this is Jack McLean. Do I have permission to leave the meeting now?
Please do, Mr. McLean. Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Brennan, for your attendance. And thank you. I guess Ms. Matumba can leave as well. Shall we address the second item on this agenda, which is, I will read it for your edification, transition from a local state of emergency provided, et cetera, and sections 15 to the Riviera Beach Code of Ordinances to recovery. Should we address that item now?
Madam Chair,
Yes, Ms. Miller Anderson.
I don't, maybe Mr. Lawson, this is his item. I mean, I don't know what is it about? What are you wanting us to do with it tonight? What we're supposed to be talking about. So I can't really say should we address it tonight or not.
And Ms. Mr. Lawson, could I just see what Madam Clerk has to say, Madam Clerk?
Madam Chair, don't forget you still have the public comment section.
Yes, okay, thank you. Mr. Lawson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This topic item was to discuss us going into phase one, being that Palm Beach has decided to move into phase one. And what does our transition look like? What is the transition from our state of emergency into regular operations, moving into what is going to be some type of normalcy? What steps are we going to take as a city? From my understanding is Dr. Botel went to the county meeting and advised on direction of opening our beaches. Yet this wasn't a discussion that we had as a council at the meeting on Wednesday. So I want to make sure that we as a council have the discussions prior to us making decisions, and we know exactly what's going on, and that we also understand what transition from our state of emergency into some type of normalcy is going to look like. Time frame wise, how long are we going to continue to pay our employees that are sitting at home? Are we going to provide some type of at-home material? Are we going to give them laptops? Are we going to continue to operate that function? Are we going to open our beaches in the facet of on May 18th, or are we going to continue to hold them closed? What are going to be some of the steps that we're taking as a city so that the council can be aware? Because I was not aware that Dr. Botel was speaking on the county meeting until I saw her on TV.
Let me say, Mr. Lawson, thank you for reminding me that I was there. I spoke not at the request of council. I made it clear that I was there not representing Riviera Beach City Council. As a matter of fact, one of the county commissioners asked me if I was there on behalf of City Council, and I told him no, we did not have a vote for me to be there. I was there simply as a council person, but not representing the city.
For clarity, Madam Chair, you said that you were there on behalf of our city manager.
I said the city manager asked me to be there. Yeah, he did. He told me about it.
Who works for the council? So from understanding that you went and, Madam Chair.
No, Mr. Lawson, let me make it clear. I was asked pointedly whether or not I was representing council. I said no. I was asked if council had voted to approve of my comments, and I said no. So it was very clear, and you can go back and look at the tape if you like. I was not representing council at that meeting. But that's neither here nor there. Is it your desire? Let's move on to the question at hand. Is it your desire that we? Is it your desire that we?
I would not like to move on. It's not neither here nor there. When you spoke at the meeting, you were specific that you were there on behalf of the city manager, not beyond the council. They were specific in asking you if you had taken a vote, and you said no, that the city manager asked you to go. So what I'm telling you now is that we want to have some understanding and transparency with what we're doing as a council, because on Wednesday we had the discussions where we could have discussed opening the beaches, which I'm adamantly against. So now, as your colleague, I want to have these discussions and continue to move forward prior to decisions being made behind closed doors. So now in the general public, we can have these discussions to talk about what we can do moving forward, because I want to understand what the transition looks like going from a state of emergency into the actual road to recovery. So now I do not, Madam Chair, I'm going to continue.
Yeah.
I do not appreciate watching a county meeting and seeing a point being taken that you are representing in the Singer Island, which is a part of the city, on behalf of a council that has not taken a vote, nor are you telling me that you represented the council, yet you said that our city manager sent you, who works for this council. So these are my concerns that I want us to address so we can be on the same page. So yes, I would like to have this discussion tonight. I don't care how long it takes.
Okay.
Yes, let's move on with that discussion. Number 2.
All right. Okay, fine. And I, again, make it clear that I was very clear, and there were no behind closed doors meetings. I take exception to the fact that it was an intimation that there was some kind of a closed door meeting. There were no closed door meetings. I presented what my constituents on Singer Island feel very strongly about, and that is that the beach is open. And so,
Madam Chair, they are our constituents.
Excuse me,
They are entire city's constituents.
I'd like to finish,
Please.
Mr. Lawson, I let you finish. I was there representing the constituents on Singer Island who feel very strongly that the beaches should be open. And I think it's appropriate that we have that conversation now. So shall we allow, do you want to, you've already made a statement, Mr. Lawson, as to how you feel about that. How would you like to proceed with the rest of this conversation? It's your agenda item.
I've asked Mr. Evans to provide some type of updates for us in regards to what we're going to do of transitioning from state of emergency, so that we can have a time frame of what we're going to do to transition out of state of emergency into normalcy within the council. If we're going to be opening the beaches on the 18th, coming Monday, what's going to be the steps and process that are being put in place, and what are going to be the operations that we do for our local businesses.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, do we have public comment?
Yes, Madam Chair, the acceptance of public comments on this particular item is now closed.
Thank you.
Are we going to proceed with public comments at this time?
Yes, please.
Okay. Ms. Hall?
Okay, the first public comment comes from the email Mega Sundog. Municipal beach parking should be available to Riviera Beach residents only. Other cities have followed this policy. Riviera Beach should view access to parking as a way to manage the crowds on the beach. The next public comment comes from Nicole Hierswitz, to whom it may concern. I am happy the beaches will be open, but worries a lot of people from all over will be coming to our beach. Will there be ID checks to ensure that there is not people from Miami or Fort Lauderdale coming in? I'm worried for the beaches to be crowded, and then you'll close it again due to people making poor choices. The next comment comes from Marina Shootman. Hello, my name is Marina Shootman. My fiance and I live on Singer Island in a condo on the beach. Since mid-March, we have not been able to use our private beach due to COVID-19 restrictions. It's incredibly frustrating when you pass Waterglades condo going north and you see 25 to 30 cars parked of people who do not live on Singer Island going fishing, kayaking, and paddleboarding. We have complied and refrained from breaking the beach restrictions. Although the private beach is an excellent way for the residents in my building to social distance, we abided and waited for the beach to open up. The beach is our backyard. We pay taxes on this property. I urge you to follow the beaches to reopen on Singer Island specific beaches. This closure has gone on long enough. It's disheartening as a tax-paying resident who just wants to social distance in her backyard and can't, without fear of breaking the law for doing so. Thank you for your time. The next public comment comes from Ray Lowe. Dear council members, I am in favor of opening our public and private beaches. I know you are aware of the science regarding sunlight and the virus, so I'm going to suggest a practical and safe way of opening our beaches. Social distancing should be required and can be enforced by our police and lifeguards on the public beach. This can be accomplished by restricting parking for the public beach, much as it is now, with chairs and cabanas placed at least 6 feet apart. However, police patrol should provide further incentive to maintain social distancing. I think we can trust our neighbors to follow these simple guidelines and refrain from what we've seen at other beaches. Thank you for for the time to hear me out, and hopefully you will reopen the beaches under these restrictions. The next public comment comes from Lori Everett. As a resident of Singer Island, I believe we are sensible enough to use our own beaches responsibly. We can maintain social distancing while enjoying the sun, surf, and fresh air that provides a healthy environment for us all. Many of us have been cooped up in our homes for 8+ weeks, and this would give us the opportunity to be outside while still practicing effective measures to keep everyone safe. The private beaches never get crowded, so distancing outside of the condos is not an issue. I don't know if it is feasible to open those while keeping the public beaches closed, but that is one option. People that come to visit our beaches tend not to be responsible. I'm not looking to deprive others, but if that is the only way to allow those of us that pay a premium to live here to utilize those resources, then I don't know if there would be a need for masks on the beach. I haven't seen the research for that. It will likely be harder to enforce. Someone can drive by and see if social distancing is taking place. It will be more time consuming for masks, and you may have more pushback. In short, it is overall beneficial for our community to have the Singer Island beaches open. The next comment comes from Lance King. I believe that if you open the beaches to everyone, then too many people will show up and not follow social distancing guidelines, as proven by other beaches around the country. I recommend that you do this in phases. I don't know where we currently are, but this is how I think it should be done. Number one, open only the private beaches for 2 weeks. Number two, if everyone is following the guidelines, then open the public beaches for 2 weeks, but do not open parking lots. Riviera Beach Mall area, Ocean Reef Park, MacArthur Park, Phil Foster Park, etc. People who can walk or bike to the beach and those parks can go, but there will be no automobile traffic. Number three, if everyone is following the guidelines, then open half of the parking lots for 2 weeks. And number four, if everyone is following the guidelines, then open the rest of the parking lots. If at any time the city sees that people are overwhelmingly not following social distancing guidelines, then back up a step for 2 weeks. Let law enforcement help decide if we need to take a step back. This way, it really is up to the people to decide what happens. If everyone follows guidelines, then we move forward. If not, then we back up to make people learn that this is serious. Also, please be sure to post at the beaches what guidelines people should follow. How far apart should people be? How big a crowd is allowed? Will masks be required, etc.? Thank you for your time reviewing my suggestions. The next comment comes from, looks like a business. It's Das, Craft Beer Pizza. Like so many businesses nationwide, the restaurants at Ocean Walk on Singer Island have been devastated by mandatory shutdowns and occupancy limitations put in place during the COVID-19 pandemic. The initial reopening seating limits have been placed at 25% with outside seating guidelines that require far greater normal space to satisfy social distancing requirements. Please allow all the restaurants at Ocean Walk to utilize the 2400 through 2600 blocks of North Ocean Avenue for outside seating on weekends from 4 p.m. to 10 p.m., Friday, Saturday, and Sunday evenings, as well as Monday, June 1st. This will be accomplished by closing North Ocean Avenue in the evenings, but accommodating beachgoers by keeping the North Ocean Avenue parking area open during the day. We would like to begin this on Friday, May 15th, and continue until the social distancing guidelines can be reduced. Restaurants would provide their own tablets and chairs. Spacing between tables would allow the 6 feet minimum requirement, and no parties of more than 10 people can be seated at the same table. Restaurants would allow all patrons of Ocean Walk to utilize their indoor restroom facilities and be responsible for trash collection and disposal. This is not intended to be a block party of any sort, but merely an outdoor seating area for friends and family to safely enjoy a dinner out. Without something like this open-air dining area that allows restaurants to seat more customers, it will be very difficult to generate the revenue needed to survive. The next comment comes from Chris Zedwick. Dear City Clerk, I would like to have the attachment read during the comments, and it reads, members of Riviera Beach City Council, I beg you to reopen the Riviera Beach beaches. County officials made a motion to reopen beaches to Palm Beach County residences and left it up to each municipality to decide when to open. I would strongly encourage you to follow their decision and open the Riviera Beach beaches on May 18th and adopt a temporary order limiting access to Palm Beach County residents only. Your order, if you choose to adopt one, may want to be limited in time frame until the Broward County beaches open. Basically, you have one area to patrol, the Ocean Walk Beach access. Palm Beach County has control over access to Phil Foster and Ocean Breeze Park, as it is their jurisdiction and it's their order. They are only allowing access to Palm Beach County residents. I don't think there will be a crowd control problem during the week. However, there will be a problem on the weekends until Dade and Broward counties move to phase 1, which we are currently in. I would suggest a similar setup to patrol the beach access with the police as when I received a free mask at Ocean Walk. Thank you for that. Have a checkpoint for identification at the entrance of Ocean Walk, and if someone is going to shop or eat at a restaurant, direct them to designated parking area. Also tell them there will be a second checkpoint at the beach entrance near the water fountain to enter the beach. There are a few police cars at the beach now restricting beach access. Rather than restricting access, these officers could check ID and allow Palm Beach County residents only. The beach is open air, UV light, and much safer than the Publix deli or Costco checkout, check-in line. We need this. Our child, besides riding her bike around the block, has not left the house in 2 months. We need sunlight, natural vitamin D, and a sense of normalcy in an outdoor space. The next public comment comes from John Miller. City Manager, Mayor, and City Council, I'm John Miller, 1290 Manor Drive. Please strongly consider supplementing our first responders. Compensation during this pandemic. Our police, fire, and rescue are out front 24/7, protecting and serving our citizens of Riviera Beach. I'm not knocking the approved manager's salary increase, but no one is more worthy of a hazard increase than all of our first responders. The previous mentioned possible 5% increase for this group is totally inadequate, especially in light of time and a half pay for all managers. I do understand our managers are out there daily helping our citizens, but in closing, no one is out front with the public more than all that protect and serve. The next public comment comes from Anne Ferrando to the council. I understand your hesitancy about opening the municipal beaches due to congestion concerns, and rightly so. However, I am confident that your team will work out the logistics, especially if you limit the beach goers to Palm Beach residents only until all beaches south of us are open. Most everyone is programmed to some degree to social distance at this point, so I'm sure the public will understand the need to do so. My concern as a condo owner on Singer Island for the last 15 years is the closure of the beach in our own backyards. Associating our private access beach and the municipal beach just doesn't make sense. It's like comparing the public park to a backyard. Yes, anyone has the right to walk on the beach, but if they don't have access, then there won't be crowds. The area of the island that we live on is heavily guarded and secure with no public access. We can only get on our beach. We can only get on our beach with a coded locked gate. There's no way the beach in our own backyard will ever be a danger to us. There is never any congestion or crowds ever. I have never seen more than a handful of people sitting on the beach, even in the peak of season. It's essentially deserted. It's ludicrous to heavily police this area as they are now doing. We don't have crowds, therefore there is no concern for the spreading of the coronavirus. That is the problem, isn't it? Crowds. I don't have a problem with police patrolling to make sure there is appropriate social distancing, but to threaten us while we are sitting alone with a fine or a court order makes no sense. The beach is a healthy environment for mind, body, and spirit. Everyone knows this. Please, I implore the council to use common sense when considering taking away our freedom to use our backyards. We pay a lot of taxes for privilege of living on the beach. If for some reason the municipal beaches need to remain closed, continue to patrol the private access beaches, but just to observe social distancing, not to arrest us for no good reason. The next public comment comes from Marianne Torres. Hello, my husband and I live on Singer Island. We are full-time residents that have lived here for 5 years. One of the reasons we moved was the right on the beach, to be right on the beach, and we pay for the privilege of our semi-private beach. I believe that the public beaches need to remain closed and the parking lot should be blocked off to discourage crowding. If people insist on ignoring social distancing, they should be fined. We need to discourage overcrowding. People should show proof via official ID, not a utility bill that some out-of-state resident can easily show since they reside in 2 places. This will only encourage people from hotspots to come down here and infect the rest of us. I have already seen the behavior of ignoring the quarantine. Our BOD had to call the police 2 times on such people. I can only imagine if the pool and beach was open. Please open private beaches and enforce the rules. I hope this makes sense. And the final public comment comes from JB Dixon, and it reads, just 4 days from now, on Monday, May 18th, the Palm Beach County plans to open its beaches again. And Riviera Beach, that includes our own municipal beach on Singer Island, plus the county beaches of Phil Foster Park on the mainland and Ocean Reef Park. The John MacArthur Park on Singer Island will also open on the same day. With 4 waterfront and ocean parks within our very small city, I'm very concerned about the very real possibility that overwhelming crowds of people who are not residents of our city or county will descend on us from other cities and counties whose beaches remain closed. This has already happened north of here in Martin County, where its beach opened to such uncontrollable crowds that they had to close the beach again to everyone except their own residents. Another example of this happening is in Naples, on the other side of the state. Naples reopened its beach and then had to close it down again because of horrendous crowds that did not observe safety measures. As a resident of Singer Island myself, I can tell you that the majority of Singer Island residents want our island beaches closed to all but the people who actually reside in Palm Beach County. Our roads are too narrow and our parking capacity too limited to accommodate people from neighboring counties who will rush to our shores because their own beaches remain closed. The residents of Singer Island remember all too well a recent 4th of July weekend when they could not even reach their own homes because of traffic jams that clogged our bridges and roads, not to mention cars parked illegally everywhere, often unsafely on private property, on swales, even in private parking lots. Police and sheriffs were outnumbered and could not control the situation. Please make sure that this problem does not occur again this coming Monday. Make a policy and publicize it widely that only Palm Beach County residents will be allowed admission to our beaches. Then use our police and our city employees to check identification before allowing cars to enter Phil Foster Park on the mainland or cross Blue Heron Bridge and the Burnt Bridge on Monday and days thereafter if necessary. That concludes public comment, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Ms.
In the area of the beach, we know the mean high water line is, the state property, and then we have our municipal beach. To your point, one of the things that we have been adamantly opposed to is differentiating the difference between public and private beaches. Some communities have allowed for access to private beaches, but that's something that from a policy perspective and an equity perspective, we did not agree with. And so once the order came out, we made it abundantly clear that all beaches are beaches. And so we have taken that stance and remain to stay on that particular point. If we're going to open the beaches, it will be accessible to all residents of the community. But you do have some condos that have property lines that actually encroach on the sand area. In some cases, there may even be some that get close to that high tide line as well.
Okay, so I guess just for clarity purposes, essentially the beach, there is no private beach on the island except for the line that is immediately adjacent to the condos and the hotels, yet the actual shoreline and water line is not private. So it would be all public and state.
It would be, those are waters and properties of the state once you get into the wet, sandy areas, yes. And in some cases you do have, and I would have to look at a survey, you may have situations where people do own or their condos do own out into the water. But if there's customary public use or access that has been provided for, then it's accessible to the general public, et cetera.
Okay. And
Mr. Lawson, I will just add that there are, however, many people on the island who have the firm belief, in fact, who have threatened to take us to court over this, that the private beaches are their backyards, and so therefore they should be allowed to use them as anybody would their own backyard. So I'm just to clarify that we may consider that, we may consider as a city that the beaches are the beaches, but those people who live on the island who have access, for example, let me give you an example. The Marriott, let's say, the Marriott up there, the resort Marriott, the large one, they have chairs that are out there, and they feel that they have a lot of control over what happens in that area. They feel that that's their private area, and so they want to be sure that we honor that. I'm not saying that, I'm just telling you that's their feeling. So that's where you get the distinction between public and private.
Right, and I just wanted to make sure that we had clarity, because there's also residents that don't live on Singer Island that believe none of the beaches are private. So I just want to make sure that all residents have clarity across the board, that there's no privatized beaches anywhere. There's up to a certain point on the actual backyard is actually owned by the private owners, but the actual beach and the beach line is state property and municipal. So I want all of our residents, go ahead, Madam Chair.
We differentiate between the wet sand. Typically, the mean high water line is the area that demarcates the public area. So no one can ever stop you from walking along what we think of as the wet sand area, because that's the line that demarcates the mean high water line.
Right. And then also, Mr. Evans, second question before you actually present, because I do believe you have some things you want to review. Are we able to limit access for residents or for citizens that do not live in Palm Beach County? Because I know that a lot of people have made the point to limit any individuals that aren't from Palm Beach County. Can we limit that access to our beaches?
No, you cannot, because of the situation where the city and probably most government entities here in Palm Beach counties has received monies from the state or federal government for renourishment purposes. And so once you collect those monies, that means that effectively you have to allow for anyone to access the beach. In addition to one of the concerns, and the county has already opined on it as far as their legal counsel, that says that they cannot put in place the language that Martin County put in place, but that language Martin County put in place is under challenge right now, I think by two individuals. So you have that, and then plus you have your constitutional right, unlawful search and seizure, if you challenge people without probable cause and those types of things. So that's a major concern, and that's something that we would like for our residents to utilize the beaches exclusively, but we can't conceivably be able to police that all and tell folks that you need to turn around and go back to your vehicle if you don't live in Palm Beach County or Riviera Beach.
Right. So now to your point, Madam Chair, this was not my statements or comments to say that there was a cynical plot to have any discussions behind closed doors, as the terms we use. What I meant by saying with that is that it was not discussed at the meeting that we had on Wednesday. And my opinion about this is that if we don't have a process in place and phases that we're going to open our beaches, if we limit our access or find out all the points, that I cannot support a claim to say, hey, let's open our beaches on the 18th, when Mr. Evans and his staff have done such an amazing job with providing masks to our community, with providing testing to our community, with keeping our numbers the lowest in Palm Beach County. I do not want to see an outbreak here in our community because we open our beaches and something similar in Naples happens where we're calling an emergency meeting to shut it back down. So I want to make sure that we have a plan in place, that we know what's going on, so that we can all be on the same page with moving forward with the beaches. And it was not a slight at you, Madam Chair, so I do apologize if that's how you took it.
Thank you, Mr. Lawson. I appreciate that. I sincerely do. I think we should allow Mr. Evans to express his opinions. I know that he does have some plans in place. I too would not want to put any of our citizens in danger in any way. I feel strongly that we should open the beaches, but absolutely if we have the right kinds of protocol in place to make sure that everyone is safe. So let's hear from Mr. Evans. Thank you, Mr. Evans.
Well, thank you. I have the fortunate opportunity to serve on the beach task force that was established by Palm Beach County. And I can tell you throughout this pandemic, that has been the number one issue that I have received emails about with regards to the beach. Who has given you the access and the authority to effectively close private beaches, etc. In this committee, we've had discussions about the beach and how can we as municipalities look to safely reopen the beach. The tentative date that was set is May 18th. However, there is conversations that some folks are looking to postpone it till the Tuesday after Labor Day. There is a Board of County Commissioners meeting on Friday that will further define and communicate exactly what the plan will be for the county. We as a city are in a bit of a conundrum from the standpoint is you have a county beach, you also have a situation where you have another municipality that also is on the island. And so then you have ours, and then we have 6 access points. So uniformity and consistency is important. And that's been what I've communicated to the beach committee. From probably about West Palm Beach north, the municipalities are in favor of seeing the beaches reopened. The cities closest to Broward and Miami-Dade are opposed to seeing the beaches open without any restrictions. The restrictions that we're looking at is putting in place social distancing, making sure that we have appropriate beach attendants, utilizing our Marine Patrol, even utilizing the drone to take a look at the area and communicate with staff that's on the front lines that are monitoring what's going on. But I want you to hear the plan that Miss Eladia Franks, and this is just a testament to the exceptional work that's being done by the team, that she has put forth to make sure that our beaches here in Riviera Beach are going to be the best managed beaches in all of Palm Beach County. We have a situation where we're going to have real-time updates every hour on the website, telling you what the capacity is. We're going to give you almost, Ms. Franks?
Thank you, Mr. Evans. Good evening, Mayor, Council, and our residents. Of course, I'm Eladia Franks. I'm the Assistant Director of Parks and Recreation. The direction of the City Manager and our SIS team, the capacity of the beach is 2,500, but staff is recommending 1,800 to ensure that social distancing is on the east side of the dunes. This recommendation, of course, is at the discretion and approval of the mayor and our council. The city personnel will be utilized to monitor and ensure the CDC guidelines are being adhered to. We will utilize our city staff, our Ocean Rescue, the Marine Patrol, Parks and Recreation, Public Works, and Police Department. The first zone will be the beach, which is east of the dune, and this is the area in which explorers will be able to access the beach. Staff will coordinate signage if the lot is full. Our Zone C is our parking lot, which is west of the Ocean Mall. We will also have 2 attendants there to monitor. Our Zone D is west of the single use, only not doubles, only single use games. Zone G will be our restrooms. Our north restrooms will be, and our south restrooms, we will have maintenance workers that are scheduled to service the beach. These controls will be in place to make sure that we monitor the 1,800 capacity and ensure that we have social distancing. Fencing will be utilized to close off the north and south sides of those beach access points. And staff will be identified by colorful t-shirts that will, of course, be using as to market mask on, hashtag 6 feet, hashtag social distancing, hashtag wash your hands, hashtag be safe. And to just make sure that we also can monitor the 1,800 capacity. As far as the signage, we'll be using City Hall marquee sign, mobile, our social media. We'll have A-frame signs and in English, Spanish, and Creole.
that will have a message board to reiterate the rules of social distancing. A closure as well, as far as staff, that will be utilizing our John Deere, our golf carts, walkie-talkies, and we'll also have a water station to keep staff hydrated, and radios.
Thank you, Ms. Franks.
Madam Chair,
Yes, you're
I just
recognized.
wanted to not, thank you, Ms. Franks. It's not related to that at all. It's about, I don't understand how we can cut these mics off, or cut the cameras off and just have one or two people. If somebody pops in here and see only one or two people on as a council, I have a problem with that. I don't want to be caught up in no situation that I don't need to be in. At one point, I was the only council person being shown. So
Ms.
we
Miller,
can't do that. I'm just sorry, I don't like that.
The only person being shown in that last few minutes was Ms. Franks. None of the other council was being shown on the television screen.
But that's not, it doesn't matter. If he goes and changes it to everyone, then everyone will see that it is only Ms. Franks that is there, as well as Ms. Wynn and myself.
Thank you. We'll try
We
to
have
stay
to
on.
have, we can pop off, but we just need to say it so that we have 3 people left on the dais and visible. That's all. That's all I'm saying.
Thank
Because
you.
I'm not getting in trouble over foolishness. I'm telling y'all, I'm not.
Thank you. Mr. Evans, did you have more to add?
And the folks on the beach committee is that we are going to coincide with the process that the county deploys, because we don't want to confuse the public. If the county deciding real-time updates from staff to where we can effectively be the sunbathing or what have you, assuming that is the direction the county goes, the county may decide and have a change of heart and decide to put in restrictions where you have to
Made any determination as to how or when or if they would close the beaches down again by some metric. Do you anticipate?
we're going to close it down in the abundance of caution. But we would certainly like to see a model that is uniformed for all the beaches here.
Thank you. Mr. Lawson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you. Mr. Evans, in regards to our staff for beaches, lifeguards, how are we protecting them in the event that they're going to be pretty much policing the beaches? Anyone that's drowning, they're pulling out of the water. How are we protecting them from being affected?
And Chief Kurt is on the line, and Chief Kurt is responsible for ocean rescue. Chief, if you can communicate to that, how we will be addressing that as it relates to our lifeguards. Chief?
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Evans. Council, good evening. Chief Kurt, Interim Fire Chief. We've had a lot of discussion and looked at several different moves by the county. Obviously, the safety of our ocean rescue staff is one of the most important concerns as we reopen the beaches. Staff on the beachfront will be fully equipped with the PPE needed and N95 masks. We're also looking at options for facial coverings. They refer to buffs that they can use while they're in close proximity with each other inside the lifeguard stand. But if they do have to come into contact with any of the beach goers, they will have the people have to swim 100 yards into the water and then effect a rescue with a mask on. Impossible. If you had to have a fishing buff around your neck, a facial covering, and you have a flailing victim and you have something around your neck that can be grabbed on and pulled on, not a good scenario. So there will be full PPE available if the rescue that is needed. Staff go out, obviously going to be looked to deploy Peterson buoys and some of the other buoys they have where if the victim is conscious, they will be able to have them grab onto or hold on to that as they pull them ashore. But if the victim is unconscious, we're going to have them come into pretty close contact with these individuals. But once they're brought ashore, the other staff will be in full PPE to begin treatment. And then that lifeguard would then don the appropriate PPE to assist. There is no good answer, Mr. Lawson, but we're do the
and state of emergency back over to council. But I would actually request that we move this item and continue it at the meeting next Wednesday. The most important and most pressing was going to be the beach discussion, but being that we do have a CRA meeting, I was seeing if we could add this item to the agenda for next week, allow for Mr. Evans to vet the ideas of the businesses that will be opening up, what processes we can assist with implementing for them, and also the staff pay. How much longer we can continue to keep staff paid and not working? What is going to be that process? What's going to be the steps? And then also state of emergency. At what time frame are we looking to transition out of state of emergency? So those are things that I think we can wait till next week, being that we've already taken up a lot of time. And I do want us to get onto the CRA. But
North of the Ocean Walk Mall to be closed. Art Peacock, who put in a public comment card about this, and the other restaurants at the Ocean Walk Mall are very interested in maximizing the amount of distance there is, physical distance between tables. And in order to do that to the best of their ability, they could put their tables out into the street. Can we agree? And if I would ask someone to make a motion, or I'll pass the gavel and make it myself, that we allow that to happen as described in his public comment card. Does everybody understand what he's asking? Ms. Lanier?
No, I just wanted to say that the county's policy, and all intents and purposes, we may have to follow what the county has going on, but I don't see cutting off, closing any streets for a particular business. If we're going to open, we're going to open.
Yeah, this would not be for a particular business. It's for the whole that whole mall area, all of the restaurants over there. And in fact, we received something recently from the county. I don't have it at my fingertips, asking that in fact all municipalities in the county afford their restaurants this ability to move out into the outer spaces around their restaurants. I mean, we could make it a blanket that, I don't know what other situation would exist in the city of Riviera Beach where people have that ability to move outside of their own space. But certainly we can, if they're asking for this consideration, and they're asking for it to be in advance of next week's meeting, so they can begin to do this right away. Mr. Evans.
That we need to do, and some other communities are doing it as a special event. So we can probably put something together for you to consider at your next meeting on Wednesday. The other side of it is I would like if the board can give staff direction whether you agree with following the county with respect to whatever direction they take on the beaches, or we prefer to have the beaches closed. Some guidance with respect to that would be much appreciated.
Perhaps someone would make a motion that we join with whatever the county decides to do. Could someone make a motion to that effect?
Well, I'm concerned, Madam Chair. Are you asking us to blindly make a motion on what they may or may not do? We're going to adopt that?
No. I'm asking you to make a motion that we, at this point, the county is opening the beaches. That's the decision that they voted on the other day. It was a 4-3 decision.
Right.
The county decided to open the beaches with no restrictions as to whether or not there would be only walking and swimming and no sitting down. They did not impose those restrictions. So I'm asking that we make a motion to adopt what the county adopted at their last meeting.
But they're revisiting the same issue, so.
I don't know that.
Have they reconvened Friday, am I right?
Chief Curd has a comment.
Chief Curd.
Council, if I could just make one comment before you go into making a final decision. There will be subsequent conversations held by Palm Beach County in determining a reopen date. I caution in your decision that if we do not join in with what the county's doing, we have 2 beaches in Riviera Beach that are county beaches. If we do not open our beach, they will go to Phil Foster Beach and they will go to Ocean Reef. But if we open our beaches, we can control and provide safeguards for our community that will not be done at those county beaches. Don't be mistaken. When the county beaches open, our community will be going to the beach, whether it's our beach or a county beach. But if we open up our beaches, I feel we can protect them and give them the best chance to be safe. That's all I have.
So to clarify for Mr. McCoy's purposes, what the motion would be that we would do what the county does. Is that right, Chief Curd? You're recommending that we do what the county does, regardless of what the county decides on Friday.
Whether we agree with it or not, we should do what the county does.
So can someone make a motion that we will
I
do?
don't understand. If we agree, I don't agree, and you haven't enumerated exactly what provisions of whatever county order or county is, and you're asking us to basically agree without knowing exactly what all of that is. I mean, that really doesn't make a lot of sense to me. In fact, wait, you were at the meeting, correct? Can you give us an update on exactly what it was that was voted on in the?
Yes, I'd be happy to. There was discussion as to whether or not there were two amendments that would have been, that could have been adopted by the county. They could have limited, actually it was really one big idea. They could have limited the activity on the beaches to only walking, going to the water and coming out again, etc. They could have said nobody can sit down, nobody can sit on a chair, nobody can sit on a blanket or a towel. They chose not to make those limitations. They also, let me think now, Commissioner McKinley.
Well, I mean, because we don't know. I mean, can we be given that information and reconvene next week on it, or what?
Well, no, we don't. We unless we meet on Friday, because the county, the likelihood is, and I can't predict the future any more than anyone else, but the likelihood is that the county will open their beaches on Monday. If we don't open ours on Monday, the situation that Chief Kerr just described will happen. People will crowd those beaches at Phil Foster and the county beach here on Singer Island, and it will be madness. My recommendation, and the recommendation of Chief Kerr, and I believe of Mr. Evans, is that we follow the county's lead. We can't know exactly what the county will do because they are going to meet on Friday. They could say, we're not going to open until a week from now. All I'm saying is whatever the county suggests, we should follow so that there is unanimity, conformity, coherence in terms of what's being done, so that we don't have a beach over on Phil Foster closed and we're open, or vice versa. So we can't predict the future. We don't know what the county will do, but what we do know is if we follow the county, we'll be safe and we'll have more coherence in terms of what our citizens will expect from us. So, Councilwoman Miller Anderson, you're recognized.
My only question is, if they go, I think at the meeting they had last week, the initial conversation was to be for Palm Beach County residents only. If that is what they decide on, how are we going to enforce that?
I think that was part of the discussions, but I think they have since gotten clarity from legal that that's not going to be incorporated as part of the order. And the draft order is emergency order number 6. That's on the Board of County Commissioners website. I can pull it and send it to the council so you can see. But they were discussing whether opening the beaches without restrictions or allowing for just people to utilize it for, mobility and access and keep it moving. But it looks like the sentiment from the conversation I had today was that it looks that they may move to a situation where the beaches are open, but the board is split on the issue, so it could possibly change on Friday.
Yeah, and I'm very hesitant on opening it as well, but I understand there are quite a few people that do want it open. I mean, we've all heard from both sides. I do agree with the issue of having the county beaches in our city, whereas if we're not on the same page as them, I mean, we would have to be on the same page, I would imagine, because it would just be confusing for one to the people as to, because a lot of people think, Phil Foster Park is the city park. I mean, a city beach. And so, I just think in terms of just being uniform, I agree with that. Now, I do have an issue, as I would with anything, making a vote on something that I don't know what it is yet. I mean, if you all want to call a special meeting for Friday just to make that one vote and only be on the call for 15 minutes to either say yes or no for what they agree on, then, and I'm emphasizing 15 minutes. But I mean,
good luck
with that. So I mean, that would, for me, that would be the only comfortable way of, of voting on something that hopefully having the answer to. I mean, tonight I don't know what that is, so I understand where Mr. McCoy is coming from. But I
Do you
wouldn't
wanna-
be opposed to having a 15-minute to go along with or to not go along.
You want to make a
That's it.
motion that we have that meeting then?
Um, are they meeting for sure? What time are they meeting?
They're going to start, I think, 9:30.
If they're meeting on if they're meeting on if they're opening the beaches on Monday, are they voting on Friday to open them?
They could, because they said the order that was posted last week is the same exact order. So if the board wants to proceed forward with that emergency order, it would just be a matter of the administrator executing it, and then everyone plans to, comply with the order or be more restrictive, because the order is going to give you the opportunity as a municipality to be more restrictive.
I'm really cautious about this, given that the guy who's on the federal level talking about, I think his name is Fauci, talking about caution about reopening when you don't have a decline in cases. But if we're going to follow the lead of the county, I think that we need to let them make a decision, and then if they make a decision to or not, I think that we should come behind them and do the same thing. But to make that decision now without them making a decision is something that's putting us in a position where we're making a decision without any county reference to go by.
So if I understand you, if someone were to make a motion that we have a meeting on Friday at some time subsequent to the county meeting, and someone seconded that, we could vote on that and then have our meeting, let's say at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, or sometime that we were sure that the county would have voted. Is that the sense that I'm hearing?
I would caution the board is taking a meeting that early.
Yeah, not
just from
one.
the standpoint that this is going to be a politically sensitive topic.
So a 6 o'clock meeting then, could someone make that motion?
I make a motion that we have a special city council meeting with only the one item regarding the opening of the beaches based on the decision that was made from Palm Beach County on Friday morning.
Can I get a
Second.
I don't know who, I think it was Mr. Lawson, but I'm not positive.
Second.
Yes.
Yeah.
Madam Clerk?
Councilperson McCoy,
No.
Councilperson Miller Anderson,
Yes.
Councilperson Lanier,
No.
Pro Tem Lawson,
Yes.
Chair Votel.
Yes.
That motion is approved with Councilpersons McCoy and Lanier dissenting.
So at 6 o'clock on Friday, we have a one item agenda. So Madam Clerk, you'll do the proper things about noticing that.
Yes, Madam
Yes,
Chair.
I just wanted to say my no was not because I didn't want to, reopen the beaches or anything, but I'm very, very cautious about the CDC's guidelines, and especially with the CDC scientists and the science that's saying that we are not in a decline, that we have to be very careful about opening up anything. So then we'll look at and of course the county, because I work for the county, they are following the lead of the Palm Beach County Health Department director. So whatever they have to say on Friday, then we can kind of, make our decision at that time.
Okay. Anyone else? Comments from Ms. Miller Anderson, you recognized?
I just want to be clear that me making the motion to have the meeting was just for that, to have the meeting. That did not commit me to yes or no,
Thank you.
for a vote. Okay.
Thank you. Mr. McCoy, you recognized?
I don't even know what we were voting on. To have a meeting to discuss.
To have a meeting with the one item to whether or not to comply with what the county is doing with regard to opening the beaches.
Right, but I don't agree that we should have a meeting a special call meeting for that. My suggestion would have been to give that authority or delegate that simply to the manager based on whatever comes up from that meeting, as opposed to us meeting again to talk about what occurred at a different meeting. I mean,
I understand, Mr. McCoy, but the thing about it is that what we're doing is that we're looking for the county's guidance on this. And if I mean, we just said that there are 4 or 5 beaches and that we only have 2 of them. So if we have a situation where everything else is open and we're not open, then I understand that we need to be able to make that decision. Now, given that statement, I want to be clear. I am not in support of opening anything at this time because of what is happening, but I have to be able to understand that it is the public, it is the people who live in this city who call the shots here and not me.
Okay, so, Ms. Ambler Anderson, did you raise your hand?
Yes, I think the reason why I agree with you. I thought that was the way we were going, the direction we were going initially, is for the manager to go ahead and roll this out. But because it's such a politically charged issue, and it seems that we're kind of split, I think that's why the meeting and having a clear vote on whether we should do it or not is why we're having the meeting. Because otherwise, yeah, Mr. Evans would have gone ahead and just did it. I mean, it wouldn't have been something that we needed to address, but because it is a politically charged issue, and some of us on the council believe it should be open and some don't. So I think that's why the conversation needs to be had during the meeting. Otherwise, yeah, Mr. Evans can do it.
And Councilwoman Miller Anderson, 15 minutes, please.
Okay. Is there anything else on this agenda, or can we call this meeting?
Madam Chair, I want to add an addition to that Friday meeting.
Go ahead.
Oh,
I object. Thank you.
I withdraw.
All right. So this meeting is adjourned. Now.
Wait a minute, we didn't have public comment?
I thought we had public comments. Do we have any, Madam Clerk, do we have public comments? More?
Let me check my staff to see. I know we have one general public comment. Let me check to see if we have any additional ones.
Thank you, Ms. Moran.
Can I get 5 minutes, Madam Chair, between the meetings?
Yes, well, we will.
Yeah, 5 minutes, please.
Madam Chair, before we go into our CRA meeting, I did have a request from my colleagues as well. Just a request for a representative for the task force that we're putting together.
Madam Chair, since the clerk has gone dark, I guess, you still have a few items, discussion by city manager, et cetera, the standard items on the agenda.
Okay. It's just getting late. Thank you. Whose mic is still on?
The city manager.
Madam Clerk.
That's not me. It was on.
Madam Chair, we have one general public comment.
Okay, go ahead.
Ms. Hall.
This public comment comes from Michael Turner. It is quite a shame that Mr. Lawson chooses to attack Chairwoman Botel simply for advocating as a fellow citizen whom lives on Senior Island on behalf of her fellow constituents. Thank you, Chair Botel, for acting on behalf of District 4 in your personal capacity. Mr. Lawson, shame on you. Seemingly, you are rather jealous of Chair Botel and is upset because you didn't think of being at the county meeting first, taking the spotlight from everyone as usual. Madam Chair, that concludes public comment.
Thank you. Just to be clear, I didn't take any.
I have a comment.
I didn't take any offense at Mr. Lawson's remarks, and he made it
None
clear.
of us did. None of us did.
But let's beyond that. We have a little bit of time here.
Madam Chair, I didn't hear the public comment. Can we ask Ms. Hall?
No, and no. Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry. I had a bad connection.
No, you're out of order as usual. Let's see if we have any discussion, deliberation. Wait a minute. Where are we? Discussion by city attorney. Nothing. City council committee reports. Nothing. Statements by the mayor and city council. Put them off. And now we will adjourn, and we will take 5 minutes. It is 8:19. Call it 8:20. We'll be back at 8:25. Right. Thank you.
Madam Chair, I just curious, do we share the same link? Or is there something else that we need to log into?
I think we can just hang on here to this one, right? I think.
Actually, this is Marcia. This is
probably. Can I get my 5 minutes, please?
Go ahead, Marcia.
Yes, I believe you have a different link provided by the CRA. Please check your calendars.
Okay, okay, all right, so we're gonna actually leave this meeting and go back and try to get into the next one. Okay, thank you.